Hey everyone, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy the audiobooks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon member. As a member, you'll gain the ability to request the next part of a novel audiobook I've uploaded, depending on your Patreon tier.
After a few turns and twists, we arrived at a large establishment where people went in and out at a constant pace. Once the attendants at the entrance saw Fen Zhe, they welcomed him with open arms. "Please follow us," the attendant said as he walked inside. The first floor had many tables full and bustling with people enjoying their food. They feasted on boar meat, fish, and other strange-looking dishes while enjoying wine and drinks of all sorts. The place seemed to be reserved for the wealthy, especially since the decoration was marvelous. Not to mention the servants who were all pretty young girls that didn't seem to find any shame in flirting with the customers for an extra tip. The men led us to the second floor, and once we arrived, a beautiful girl led us to a private room where we went inside and sat on comfortable chairs. "Get us the usual," Fen Zhe said, and the girl nodded. Then she closed the room and immediately I felt my ears popping. It was as if the room was locked airtight. "Silent room," I mumbled. "Right. Anything you say here will stay here. These rooms are designed to counter eavesdropping," Fen Zhe said. "Right, then what do you want to talk about?" I asked. "Right then, well, I just wish to know more about you. See, the fact that you came into the Imperial City flying where it is well known to be a flight-prohibited area means that you're not from around here. Also, you didn't seem too worried about me, nor my senior disciple Shui Lu. Meaning that you clearly have a good background. I wish to make friends with such people, you never know when they come in handy." Fen Zhe explained his reasons. Though they seemed clear and innocent, I wasn't too dumb to believe them. My origin will remain mine to speak of. It's a good strategy to keep it secret as it will deter many off of my back if I were to get into trouble. Secondly, I'm here for training. "Oh, I understand, I wouldn't want to pry further," the man said, and he clearly didn't mean what he just said. He still had questions and I know how he wants to extract them from me. There was a knock on the door and the girl from earlier had come with a group of servants to serve our food. It was stocked with fresh meat, whale, and fish, and all sorts of delicacies that need 10 men to finish. Yet the most auspicious was the alcohol. The alcohol they brought was in covered pots that looked ancient. Old rice wine. It should be delicious. I went for the wine first, and the moment I took a gulp, I grinned. "This is good stuff," I said as I swallowed what should be compared to lava and not alcohol. The damned beverage was really hot but strong and delicious. And this confirmed my suspicion, this man wants to get me drunk enough so I can let my guard down. Though it's nigh impossible to get cultivators drunk on mortal wine, cultivator wine on the other hand is powerful enough to knock out the heaviest of immortal drinkers. Yet, that would never be the case for me, simply because wine is poison. I drank from the pot relentlessly, even competing with the shocked man. "Have another drink, Fen Zhe," I said as I giggled. "I never thought you'd have such tolerance. Hell, you're a good drinking partner," the man smiled. This time it was genuine, and he actually drank a full cup in one go, challenging me to a competition. We talked about random things, most of all, our cultivation, which I simply decided to lie to him about. "I cultivate the stars," I said. "Oh, a star cultivator, rather amazing. I see why you went to those bandits at night. Most star cultivators are superior at night time." "Yes, but we can even be strong during the day. People fail to understand that the sun is also a star. And using it to power one's cultivation is the best way to overcome difficulties," I replied as I took another gulp. The man pondered for a while before he raised his cup in cheers. "That was rather simple yet enlightening. Thank you for sharing such knowledge." "It shouldn't be that much, it's common knowledge, don't mention it," I replied. "What about you?" I asked. "Ruthless water sword," the man said. He tapped the alcohol pot with a finger and the wine inside it jumped up in the air, creating a water sword. The sword hovered in the room, flew around for a bit then dipped back into the pot. I clapped at the party trick. "Amazing display of skill, I'm envious," I replied. The man kept laughing and never forgot his primary goal of goading me to reveal more about myself, yet the more I spoke, the more confused he was. I only spoke the truth, yet always incomplete truth. This way, he'll never think that I'm lying to him, nor would he believe I'm telling the whole truth. Lies are easy to figure out, yet incomplete truth leaves a man with a sense of incomplete understanding. He would rather not push the matter further also, because he will believe himself to be rude if he were to insist. And since I already told half-truths, he has information, incomplete, yet still, information is better than nothing, and that will take him off of my back. Right, so you said you're a rogue cultivator. Are you willing to join our sect? The man asked. I'm sorry, but I decided to go through my cultivation alone. I have no need to bind myself to a single place. I still wish to see a lot of this world. I replied. I respect your discuses, Shaun. Still here, the man handed me a token. Damn, I'm collecting these like Pokemon now. This is a guest's token. Show it to the guards at the Imperial sect and you'll be granted entry. Come visit whenever you wish, also for the cultivation cave you asked for. Here. The man handed me a jade and a key. This is the location to a secure house I have in the city. You can get in and use it as you see fit. There is a cave underneath it with a small spiritual vein. It's not as powerful as the ones you find in sects, but it's good enough for one person to cultivate in it. Oh, that a lot. I can't accept such an offer. I replied. Don't worry about it, we're friends, the man said. I gave the man a rueful smile. I'll make sure to pay you back. I don't like to owe favors. I replied. Do as you wish. For now, let's have more wine, the man shouted as he slapped his cup on the table. More wine kept coming in, and we didn't leave until Fenze was able to see 3 of me at once. As for me, after the first cup I had, the moment I started to feel buzzed and lightheaded, I began rotating my poison chi, consuming the alcohol, destroying it, and converting it into poison chi. And to be honest, the alcohol in this establishment was potent enough that I actually raised my cultivation a little. I think I'm done for today, Fenze said while gulping. Yeah, I guess, more than this and we'll be knocked out cold on the floor, I humored the drunk man. We both walked out of the bar, or at least I walked out. Fenze was barely able to stand up and I had to carry him out. The staff never asked for payment, so it seems that because he was a regular, they wouldn't bother with following us. Thank God, as I didn't have any money on me right now. Shuelioa, the man that I met yesterday night, came over. He looked pissed. Fenze. What's the meaning of this? Have you been drinking again? Shuelioa shouted. And in a second, the drunk man next to me stoutened up, standing like a palm tree. Yet that didn't take more than a couple of seconds before he fell to the side, losing balance. Yeah, I think I did drink a bit, senior brother, he said while laughing. Shuelioa took the man and gave me a despicable look before he left with his junior brother. Well, that went well, I said as I looked around. I had already located the general area where the house Fenze had gifted me. And I walked toward it. The city was quite big, and since I couldn't use my sword to fly around it, I had to rent a taxi. Which was a carriage that was dragged by a buffed man for a few silvers. And since I didn't have any silvers, I threw the man a silver ring I found on one of the bandits' bodies. Once I arrived at the house, which was located in the middle sector of the Imperial City. It was inconspicuous and didn't seem to have any close neighbors. It would be perfect for cultivation. I entered using the key that Fenze gave me. The house was a simple 2-story house. It had a couple of rooms and nothing of value. It had a trapdoor under a rug that led down to a small cultivation cave. By saying a cave, I mean a dug-in square room underground that could be closed and opened. Once I was inside the room, I made sure to check every corner and bit of the room. Once I was sure that there were no tools to spy on me, I began by pulling the book. Yet the book didn't want to emerge. I understood that I didn't check enough. The book would only reveal itself when no one else was present, and from the reaction of the Poison God's book, someone was either spying on me or there was something I missed. Yet I had made sure to check everywhere. Yes, I checked everywhere, but at the same time, I forgot the most important place to check, on myself. I tapped at my clothes and robes. Nothing came to sight, but 2 things, the token Fenze had given me, and the jade. The token didn't have anything obvious about it, but the jade, on the other hand, shimmered with spiritual energy. Though I couldn't sense the spiritual energy, the poison chi in me can easily react to it. And when I tried coating the jade with poison chi, it seeped into the jade and broke it, shattering the thing into tiny pieces. The Poison God's book immediately shot out of my chest. I guess the jade was the spying tool. I'll have to talk to Fenze about this later. Now, let's start, I mumbled to myself as I pulled the pouches. I hope I could open them now. I had about 7 cultivator pouches, all belonging to the cultivators that had captured and tried to kill me in the poison god's cave. The first pouch I pulled belonged to the men with the crimson robes. And just as I was about to pry it open to see what was inside it, the poison god's book shot right in front of me, opening a page. I looked at the second pouch. After all, opening the first one was gonna kill me, so I'm better off not to try and pry into eye traps. For the second pouch, there were no warnings. I actually waited and even asked the book if there was any danger entailed in opening this pouch, but seeing that there was no such thing, I went ahead. The pouch only needed for me to infuse it with a little bit of chi. It didn't matter if it was poison chi or spiritual chi. Chi is chi, and the pouch is neutral to the type. So it opened, and the moment I touched upon the rims of the pouch, it gave me a picture of everything within it. There were thousands of pill bottles and herbs locked in spiritual boxes. Oh, preserve them. There was also a small hill of small stones that gave off powerful spiritual energy. Weapons of all sorts and robes, dress for the cultivator. These robes all had the same color and shape, and the same logo. It was a sex uniform. There were also some tokens, and the most interesting were cultivation books. I also found a piece of a map. I pulled it and understood that this was the map to the poison god's cave. It seems that all of these cultivators had a piece of the map. They gathered up and made the map as a whole and then went to the cave once they discovered the location of the treasure. I ignored the rest of the content of the pouch as it didn't have anything else worth mentioning. I continued looking at the other pouches and found a lot of good stuff, mainly weapons and herbs of the 8th to the 7th ranks. There was only the first pouch that I couldn't open, and it seems that it belonged to the strongest cultivator of the bunch, so I was better off keeping it for when I could open it while keeping my life. I began by gathering all the items that I thought are worth my time in the poison god's book. As for some of the weaker weapons and some healing pills, those I placed in a pouch and placed it on my side. I needed to have a fake pouch for whenever I found myself in trouble. It would come in handy to not have all my eggs in one basket. Now that's done, I went back to the main thing I was after, puppet making. I started by pulling the puppet that was going to kill me back at the spider cave and placed it down. I had a few tools that I found from one of the cultivators who seemed to have a side interest in puppet making, and pulled them out. I needed to understand how this thing works, and thanks to my knowledge in the engineering domain, this puppet was going to be a great project. Once the puppet was out, I began by dismantling it. I needed to understand how it worked and how I can mimic it. The whole thing was truly difficult to untangle. Every screw and bolt had a mechanism to protect it and keep it in place that I had to pop off first before reaching the screws. I managed to unbolt them and remove the head of the torso, and once the head was out, I started by removing the right hand, which was the only limb left on its upper body, and then the legs. Once every piece was out, I noticed that they didn't seem to have any wires connecting them, so how did the limbs receive the command to move? I figured I needed to dig in deeper. The head didn't look like it had anything special. Supposedly it wasn't where the brain was located. I looked at the chest area, where the tip of the sword was embedded. There looked to be something that was dug in by the sword. I had to open the chest to see clearly. There was a small hidden plate that covered the screws of the torso. Once I removed the screws, I was able to open the chest from the side of it. It opened like a box, revealing its inside. There was a golden circle drawn in the chest area, and right at the middle was a broken spiritual stone. Though broken and clearly old, it seemed to still have some spiritual energy within it. It would still work as a power supply. Once I made sure that the jeweled piece was removed from its place, I began by studying the circle. There seemed to have several strange letters and symbols to it. They were organized in different and various shapes around the circle, and the pinkish stone was powering them. Yet, with the sword dug in deep, the circle was broken and it seemed that it no longer worked. The sword had cut through a great part of it, leaving it barely readable. If I were to reverse engineer this, I'll need a reference point. I started by pulling the other puppets and dismantling them, which took the better period of the night. I could even know it was day by the rising temperature in the room. Still, I worked diligently. Heck, this was bringing me back to my roots, and it was fun. I enjoyed using my hands, especially in anything that dabs in precision and details. Once I dismantled the majority of the puppets, I began by writing the symbols on a piece of paper, going from puppet to puppet, and figured out a few things. Not every circle was an exact match to the other. There were a few differences, especially in the drawings. And the one that had the most complete and detailed and perfect circle was the first puppet I dismantled. It seemed to have the best quality. As for the stones, most of the other puppets had their stones destroyed and were inoperable and unusable. Once I compared the circles, I managed a rough drawing of a complete one in a piece of paper. I studied it and understood some other things. It seems for whatever reasons these writings were like programming codes, and once they are put together they will make a brain of sorts that can execute simple commands. Though I didn't fully understand the exact meaning of every symbol, I could get the gist of them. And with a few repetitions, I could manage to write them. I began by reproducing the circle on other pieces of paper, and after a long time, I managed to perfectly draw the circle and could duplicate it from memory alone. Now I needed to see how this drawing could revive a dead puppet. First things first, I'll need a puppet that is in operable condition, and the only one that almost matches this condition is the first puppet. Though it has a deep gash in its chest and was missing a limb, I was able to replace them from other puppets. Now that the chest was perfect and the left limb was taken from another puppet, I put the whole thing together, making the puppet. I opened its chest area and carefully wiped away the golden drawing that didn't need more than a wet cloth. As it seems, the ink that was used to write this inscription wasn't permanent. That was a flaw. Imagine if the puppet was in contact with water, that'll make it faulty immediately. And though I don't know which ink I should use to write the circle, I know of a good quality ink that can be used to write talismans. The drowsy inkberry, which was a spiritual herb I got when I was in the Purple Cloud sect. I took the drowsy inkberry and followed the instruction of the Poison God's book on how to process it and make it into ink. It didn't need more than a bit of dew water, and a pot which was in abundance in the cultivator's pouches. After batting the herb and mixing it with water, then extracting the liquid that turned black after a short while, I pulled out a brush and began drawing on the puppet's chest. I completed the circle but left only one small line of it which will serve to close the circuit. That line I wrote in regular ink that can be removed with a splash of water, for reasons that I will explain later. Once the puppet was done and the circle was completed and closed, I placed one of the spirit stones I had in my book in the center. Though this spirit stone wasn't as powerful as the pink one which was there before, it should be enough to operate the puppet at low power. Almost immediately the puppet turned to life and it took a slow swing at my face. I dodged it and splashed its open chest with a cup of water I had readied before. The puppet immediately stopped working as the line that was written in regular ink had faded. Well, I guess there is a kill on sight command in that circle. The problem is I don't know which one. Time for some trial and error tests, I said, and began by removing one of the symbols. The only way for me to figure out the attack command was by the process of elimination, and only when I eliminate the appropriate symbol would the puppet actually not attack me. And then I began by replacing symbols, removing them, changing them, rewriting them, and even writing strange gibberish instead of symbols that were already written. This process was going to take a while, and I had a lot of time. Several days went by as I continued to study the symbols. I even went around the city for a couple of days to clear my head off, had a few drinks, and practiced star cultivation, then resumed my work. I had great hopes for puppet making and I had great ideas to integrate into it, so I wanted to be thorough while making the symbols. One day though, I happened to walk across the street and saw a man selling some goods, and among them was a specialist tool for puppet making. I asked him how he got it and his answer was simple enough that it left me baffled at how I completely missed it. The auction house, he said. Apparently, he thought he had purchased something expensive, and seeing the tool on close-up, I noticed a few signs of wear and damage. This thing wasn't worth much in the hands of an amateur, but if I could get my hands on that tool, I'll be able to upgrade my own tools to better handle the puppets. You willing to sell? I asked. 200 spirit stones, the man said. I'll give you 10, I answered. Are you mad? You know how much I paid for this, the man answered in question. I don't really care, but you seem to not know how to use this, nor what is it for. This is a tool for puppet making and it's already damaged beyond repair. If anyone would like to have this tool, they'll often get a new one. After all, puppet makers are rich. And they won't settle for second-handed goods. I shrugged. Ha! Nice way to try and trick me out of a deal, but if that was true, then why are you trying to buy it? 150 spirit stones, the man answered smugly. 10 stones, and I'll tell you why, because I need to use the tool as a mold to make a new one, so basically I'll discard it the moment I make a mold out of it, I stated, giving him the impression that I was buying garbage. The man looked at me like I was crazy. He still tried to haggle some more, but after a long while, all he got from me was 20 spirit stones, which I reluctantly gave. I could have stayed there haggling with him all day long, but I was tempted to try the tool as soon as possible. I pocketed the tool and went to the nearest pavilion. The man had said that he bought the tool at an auction, but since auctions usually have a specific time, once a month, year, or decade depending on the value and importance of the auction, I couldn't wait for one to appear. So, the pavilions of the capital were my best bet. Once I was at the capital's pavilion, I took a pause, frowning deeply. Compared to the Purple Cloud sect, the Imperial Pavilion was rubbish. It didn't look like it had anything important even with all the over-the-top decoration and paintings. It didn't have the honesty and detailed fine work of the wood, ceilings, and floor of the Purple Cloud Pavilion. I guess the Purple Cloud's 4th grade sect's secret identity was what made it into such a prosperous sect. And when they were attacked, even the pavilion had disappeared due to its quality. Seems like the Imperial sect can't even hold a candle to the Purple Cloud sect. I went into the pavilion and was greeted by a young girl. "Welcome to the Imperial Pavilion. What can I do for you?" she asked. "I need some 7th grade materials, and books on puppet making," I said in a disregarding manner. Most people here tend to act all haughty, and I needed to act the part, especially since I had no idea how much these items cost. Better to act like a snobbish noble, at least people will think twice before trying to inflate prices, lest they offend me. "Sir, puppet making materials and crafting materials of the 7th grade requires authentication by the Imperial Court. You'll need a VIP clearance to have them," the girl said, but there was still a hint of fear in her eyes. I guess my attitude worked. I frowned at the girl but immediately showed the girl the token I got from Fenzei. The girl immediately bowed and said, "For an esteemed guest of the Imperial sect, you're more than welcome to get anything you wish from the 7th grade materials and the manuals you're looking for at a 20% discount, Sir Master Craftsman." Master Craftsman. The heck? I supposed she deduced it from the fact that I was trying to buy crafting materials, but I was not going to correct her. The more of a high impression I give, the better I'll be treated. "Good then, lead the way," I said as I followed after the girl. Thankfully Fenzei had proved useful. This might even make me forget about his sly attempt at trying to spy on me using that jade. Probably. I followed the girl to the 3rd floor of the pavilion where she showed me the door and said, "You can have your pick of the materials you want from here. Once you chose everything you need, once esteemed guest is done, please come back to the receptionist and he will charge you for your items," she said while giving a bow. "You mean I get to freely pick? Aren't you afraid that someone would steal from you?" I said. "Sir, no one had ever dared steal from the pockets of the Emperor. Only a fool would dare do such things. As for powerful people, they'll not even take a second look at this pavilion," she said in a matter-of-factly. True, there could also be a tracking mechanism on the items, so stealing would be a really dumb idea for anyone not capable. I went inside the room and saw several shelves stocked in materials. Black stone, ingreed iron, sleuth wood, frictionless obsidian and many more rare minerals and items. These are all heavily sought after for puppet makers. But compared to the material the puppet I had gotten were made of, everything here was worthless. I kept looking around until I was stopped by the book. It shone a bright light on a specific stone in the pavilion. As I looked at it, it didn't look special. It was a purple stone, a spirit chi sealing magnet. It wasn't uncommon, but it was a useful material. It could cut the flow of spiritual chi when it came in contact with it. It's a pretty good item to make puppets as it could allow a puppet to preserve energy, but it shouldn't be that important due to how easy it is to find. Also, there were other rocks like it all over the shop, but the book only lit this one piece. I still decided to take that one piece and continue my search. After a while, I managed to procure many items I needed: tools and writing brushes, more drowsy inkberry fruits to make the ink, and a few parchments to make talismans. Finally, I got 2 more books: Basic Knowledge of Talisman Writing, and Puppet Making. The Poison God's knowledge of puppet making was not bad, even if he himself said that he didn't know much about it. His knowledge and the symbols he knew had far surpassed the puppet I had, so they were basically useless to me in making my own puppet, especially since his own symbols required Saint Chi to use, which was a grade higher than spiritual Chi. Saint Chi can only be obtained once one had ascended, discarding the mortal body and attained unity with the world. A true saint, then their whole body and the quality of Chi they can harness would evolve. For me, Saint Chi is so far away that I can't even fathom the full scope. A simple comparison would be that a single piece of rice worth of Saint Chi is comparable to a whole mountain of spiritual Chi. It's just not possible for me right now. So using the same symbols as the poison god is dumb, as I don't have the energy to control it, yet using his knowledge, his symbol organization, and factoring it against the symbols of regular Chi would relatively make for powerful restrictions. Yes, the correct term I discovered was restriction. And restrictions have enormous ranges. They can be something benign as lighten up a room, to something as complex as defending an entire planet. A restriction, based on the knowledge of the user, can become a killing formation or a defending formation that can make illusions, or it can even gather spiritual chi. That's a whole damned sea of knowledge I need to look into. For now, puppet making doesn't make even a slight fraction of the entirety of restriction, but I'm going to try and master it, then look into the other aspects of restriction. I want to make something unique, never before seen in this world, and I'm going to do it. I smiled as I had great goals, and it was the first time in more than 70 years that I had a clear goal. The first goal I had when I got to this world was to make the city of Lucid Spring prosper using my own methods, and now, I have even greater goals. And once I set my eyes on something, I'll do it, no matter what. I went to the clerk and paid my dues. It wasn't much, after all, the money is coming from the pockets of those despicable cultivators that had tried to kill me. Once I was back home, I pulled out all the stuff I had gotten and began by studying the arts of puppet making. The book started by introducing the symbols and their meaning, and thankfully I had a prior attempt at deciphering the symbols of the puppet, so I had a good basic understanding of what I was doing. I started studying the symbols and understood the meaning behind every one of them, and how they all worked together to write a code of sorts. It was like writing a computer program, nothing too difficult after a good study session. And once I understood a symbol properly, I tried to apply it. First things first, movement symbols. I used one limb of a puppet and wrote a small circle on it, then began by painting the movement symbols on it. Nothing happened. After all, there was the movement command written on it, but the execution command was missing. I then went back to the book and looked for the execution section and how to make a puppet do your work. Basically, it can be used using different methods. Speech, which will have me make sound reception into the puppet's limbs so it could translate my speech and pick up the execution command to apply it. So I needed to write another set of symbols alongside the command symbols. Then I had another idea. What if the puppet was in a situation where it couldn't hear me speak? I needed a secondary input in place, sight. I needed to look for sight reception commands and write them. I continued modifying and writing on the puppet's arm, and after days and sleepless nights, I managed to finish my work. The hand I had was packed full of writings and symbols, so many of them, so complex and tightly packed that they looked like small tattoos. The puppet's arm was a prototype, and it took the better half of a week just to make every command written on it function with each other and not overlap. I'm surprised that whoever wrote that simple-looking circle in the middle of the puppet managed to do it. But once I went back to the original restriction on the primary puppet, which now I called X, I was surprised at my own advancement in the domain of restrictions. The primary restriction, now that I fully understand the symbols on it, had only 3 commands: sight and sound reception, attack on sight, and hibernate. Nothing too fancy, except the attack command, which had several sets of commands that allowed the puppet to move, though, in a monotonous robotic way. It was powered with a powerful spirit stone that allowed the puppet to move at extraordinary speeds. But my commands touched upon the rims of human behavior. I had written symbols and circles all over the puppet's arm, enough of them that there were circles in between the puppet's finger joints. My symbols had focused on precision than brute function. Not only that, but the arm itself was a sentient part that, once powered with a spirit stone, can function on its own. It can even use the fingers to move, something that I was about to test out right now. I placed a small spirit stone on a small hole that I dug into the arm's joint where it would connect to the puppet's shoulder. The puppet's arm came to life as the spirit stone shone bright and lit up the symbols. Soon the arm shuddered, flexed its fingers, and then clenched them in a fist. "Come to me," I gave a command, and the hand immediately began moving using its fingers. Sadly, it didn't take the hand more than few feet before the light on the symbols turned off. I panicked at first. Did I write something wrong? This was a coder's worst nightmare. The computer code looks fine but it doesn't work, or worse, the code looks terrible yet it somehow works. I needed to find the error. Just as I was about to pull out my tools, I noticed specks of dust settling behind the arm. As I picked up the arm, I noticed something daunting. The spirit stone had been completely sucked dry and nothing of it remained as it turned to dust. I guess so many restriction symbols need a lot of energy to function. I need more powerful spirit stones. I sighed, but that didn't discourage me. This means that my symbols work. And I can write more of them. I began by picking a second arm for Puppet X and started writing on it. This time it took me 5 days before I was done, and after testing it by feeding it a spirit stone and making sure the arm functions perfectly, I went for the legs, then the chest, then the head. 3 months, I spent 3 months working on the puppet, making it stronger, faster, more very styled. I even placed poison-coated needles inside the puppet's fingertips. The fingertips would fall down and the puppet can shoot tens of poison needles out of its fingers. I also placed 2 canisters full of my own poison breath inside the puppet's chest, where it can actually shoot poison breath similar to my own. Then I took one of the swords from the pouches of one of the cultivators and inscribed sword techniques into the puppet. Though it was nothing fancy, the sword techniques should be enough to hold a core-forming cultivator at bay. All of this work had me exhausted, and without actually noticing, I had already touched the rims of a breakthrough in my cultivation. Thanks to my cultivation method, where I didn't need to continuously meditate and harness the world's chi, I only needed to consume poisonous substances, and with a bag full of toxic herbs, I managed to rise to the peak of a breakthrough of the first layer of the foundation establishment. I only need a little push to get me to the second stage of foundation establishment. Sadly, however, I never managed to operate the puppet. The problem was the number of symbols I had written. There were so many of them that they actually require so much spiritual energy. Even after placing 5 spirit stones, 1 in each shoulder and 1 over every thigh, and once in the center of the puppet, I couldn't have Puppet X function for more than 10 seconds. I kept scratching my head for answers. I needed a powerful spirit stone, at least something like that pink spirit stone that was in the puppet before. But I don't have a complete one, all I have is a broken pink spirit stone. I needed to get to the pavilion. Hopefully, they'll have a spirit stone just like that one. I gathered the puppet and placed it inside my book, then left the house. Just as I walked out, I saw a man sitting in front of the house. He looked exhausted and out of it. Once he saw me, he perked up. "Señor Shen Bao. Finally, you're out. Brother Zen Fei wanted me to inform you to meet him as soon as possible, and that was a month ago," the man said. "Right, then why didn't you knock?" I asked. "I wouldn't disturb your cultivation session." "All right, most people would enter secluded cultivation and don't want to be disturbed, though I don't need to seclude myself. I don't also need to tell that man of this." "Right, I'll have to apologize to Brother Fenze. I'll go meet him as soon as I'm done with something," I said. "All right, I'll inform him of such," the man said and hurried away. I sighed. I hope that Fenze doesn't need any favors. I still have so much on my plate right now to even bother with him. I headed to the pavilion, and once I was there, the girl that I last met welcomed me with an over-the-top greeting. "Greeting, Master Craftsman." I glowered at the woman, and what the heck is up with Master Craftsman? When did I get that? Perhaps she thought I was, since I was buying crafting materials, but everyone could be a Master Craftsman following that logic. Or, perhaps it was Zen Fei. Damn, I didn't need this, and I still have a business to take care of. I need something from the pavilion. Hopefully, you can provide. "Anything for the master. What is it that you wish to procure?" she asked. "A spirit stone, a rather powerful one, or multiple?" "I suppose you're looking for medium-grade spirit stones. They are rather rare, but I think I can get you some. Actually, this is even perfect. Please follow me." "What's this about now?" I wondered but followed the girl. The woman took me to the 3rd floor where a few men were bickering about something. "No. It won't function, I told you, the symbols aren't aligned. This is a defected product," a bald man called in an over-the-top fashion of throwing his hands. "I swear I saw him use it. He even flew using it." Another man, younger, who looked like a homeless person, spoke. He had a pleading demeanor, like a commoner in front of nobility. 2 other men were looking at what seemed to be a gourd. The first was a small old hunchback. He didn't look much different than me, with the exception of the lack of pustules over his body and his thin slits for eyes that seemed almost closed. The other one was a younger dark-skinned man, probably in his mid-30s. He looked like a buffed athlete that could get first place in a bodybuilding competition. "You're blabbering too much, this doesn't function," the bald man said. The girl next to me coughed, and everyone turned to take a look at me. "This is Master Craftsman Shen Bao, Cultivator Fenze has recommended him," she said. "Yep, this confirms it. Damn you Fenze and your drunken blabbers." "Master Craftsman Shen Bao. I never heard of that name. Still, what do you think about this?" the bald man said as he threw the gourd my way. Immediately, my eyes began processing the gourd. It felt as if it was the most natural thing to do, especially after those months of work in my study. "Pretty intricate, but faulty," I said. "You too," the homeless man said. "I swear I saw a man flying using it. He gave it to me in exchange for a bite." "I'm not lying." I didn't say that I can't fly, but the one who made it actually gave it to you because he knew it's faulty. Look here, I said as I tapped at the bottom of the gourd. The thing immediately grew to a pony's size, earning the gawking shocked eyes of everyone present, and it even hovered in the room. The one who inscribed this failed to make proper connections of the writings, thus if someone with. I trailed as I looked at everyone. I don't wish to offend anyone here, but I have to speak truth, I said. The three looked at me while frowning, unable to understand what I was talking about. Right, so as I was saying, if someone inexperienced were to look at the gourd they'd think it's inoperable and faulty, but this is of no fault of yours, I said to the three as I saw their expressions change. I don't even know them and I don't want to offend them. The last thing I want is to make enemies. I'm not here to slap faces. That stuff only works for those story heroes because they have plot armor protecting them. If I were to try my luck, I'm going to end up 6 feet under. I'm not strong enough to start a face-slapping contest, at least right now. The three looked at me, annoyed, but thanks to having informed them that it was not their fault that they were inexperienced, I was able to continue my train of thought. Actually, I have to correct myself. The more masterful a person is, the harder it is for them to notice this flaw. I had to switch my tone. They seemed unimpressed when I first called them inexperienced. The one who inscribed this had tried to make several inscriptions work together, but due to his lack of knowledge and his constant attempt at correcting it, he managed to cover his inscription error by sheer luck. So, the gourd will actually consume more chi from the user than needed due to these excessive and extra inscriptions. So, this thing is faulty, and the attempt at correcting that fault further ruined this gourd. The bald man immediately interjected, "Ha! As Brother Shen Bao had said, I told you it was faulty." The old man started trying to curry favor with me and hide his ignorance, an attempt everyone noticed but no one spoke about it. It was a silent agreement between them all, stroking their own ego in a sense as to not appear dumb. Right, like Master Shen Bao had said, the more promising an inscriber is, the harder it is to notice this flaw. It is amateurish but hidden with many other restrictions that made no sense. The whole inscription would make one see so many mistakes in it that it actually covers the erroneous primary writing that commands chi consumption, the old hunchback inscriber added, though his statement was correct. If I didn't hint it to him, he'd never get it. We still have much to learn. Brother Shen Bao, a true master craftsman, even talented such as us, should have seen that mistake. Your knowledge humbles us, the younger of the three said. Don't worry about it, I'm sure you could have figured it out given more time. I think I lucked out because I came late and was out of context, thus, I was able to see from a perspective you haven't seen. I continued stroking their ego. After all, a little bit of praise costs nothing, and it could take you a long way if used correctly. So, is this thing worth anything? The beggar asked. As it is now, no, but once the restrictions are rewritten, removed, and corrected, I think it would be a good flying treasure, I said. Yeah, and that will probably cost a lot, the type of money you can't afford. The bald man said, I can buy it from you for 20 spirit stones. The bald monk said. I'd rather sell it to this man, the beggar said as he pointed at me. You're putting me in a tough spot. I won't vie for something, brother. I trailed as the girl never introduced the man. I'm Xian Yufan, the bald man said, and this is Master Craftsman Han Xiao, and Gang Bei. The man mentioned the other two craftsmen by name. Right, as I said, I won't vie for something Brother Xian has their eyes on, I replied. Ha! No, actually, your interjection and saved us a lot of time. I actually wanted to buy it and gift it to Brother Shen Bao for enlightening us. It is only natural, the man said, still trying to curry favor with me. Thank you, I won't be polite then, I said. The beggar took the 20 spirit stones and left the store, and I had a gourd for my own personal experiences. Would brother have some time to share a meal with us? We would like to discuss some of our concerns with you. Xian Yufan said. Damn, everyone wants knowledge, I have to play my hand right. Sure, I would like to exchange pointers with masters of the trade. Still, I came here for something, I said. What is it you wish to get? Xian asked. Now, I had two options. First was to speak and show how ignorant I am. I want a pink spirit stone. That would sound dumb as heck, especially after all that work trying to make everyone think I'm actually smarter than them. So, I took the second option. I pulled out the destroyed remains of the pink spirit stone and showed it to them. Oh! A high-grade spirit stone. Those are really rare. How did you find it? Now, that was frigging close. If I were to show them the stone and say this was a medium spirit stone, it would have immediately blown my cover. That attendant, however, was clueless and thought I needed a medium spirit stone, and due to her words I almost ruined myself. Yeah, I'm in need of a few of them. I'm ready to pay any price. I have a couple, I'd like to exchange them over a few pointers, the old man said. I have one, the dark-skinned man said, and I'm willing to gift it to Brother Shen Bao just in thanks for your enlightening session. I have 3, and I can gift them to you in return. Xian Yufan said and trailed off, but I finished his sentence for him. I'll fix the gourd, reinscribe it and show you the method. I smiled at the man who had a wide grin on his face. The gourd would need a lot of time to repair it, and he obviously lacked the experience. Showing him how it was done would be a great boon to his knowledge. Surprisingly, these master craftsmen were not as talented as they give off the feeling. I only studied inscribing restrictions for a few months and I'm league ahead of them, and they seem to have spent ages in this domain. Could it be the mind's eye? After all, when I was working I had the mind's eye on full throttle. Anyway, my offer was tempting enough and I needed those high-grade spirit stones. Right then, let's head to Fusha restaurant, it has food that can take you to heaven and back, Xian mentioned, and the 2 others looked as if they had hungered for centuries. The dark-skinned man even wiped some drool out of his face. How did Brother Xian manage to land a reservation? The old man Han Shao asked. I managed to inscribe the young prince's sword a few days ago and he gave me a token to visit the imperial restaurant and I could take as many as I wish, so this one is on me, the bald man laughed as he walked first. Well, I wasn't going to say no to free food, also I managed to obtain what I came for. So why not follow after these 3, who knows, I might encounter something interesting. Once we entered the Fusha restaurant, which by the way was an impressive 10-story tower building in the middle of the city, it looked prominent and amazingly decorated. The people within it were all high figures, the big wigs of the empire. Generals, high-ranking officers, great scholars, and even imperial entourage, from young princes to princesses and their attendants to some royal guards. This whole place stank of rich pockets and cocky attitude. I was not going to fit here if I were to open my mouth without thinking. Our group, even considered of the best craftsmen in the region as I came to understand from the introduction that Xian Yufan had been given once he entered, were not wroth accessing the higher floors. It seemed that only generals and high-ranking alchemists, craftsmen, and any cultivator below the nascent soul level were allowed access to this floor. I didn't care if I was seated next to an emperor or a beggar, all I needed was to have a proper meal since I haven't eaten in long months. And to exchange a few notes with the people. Though I felt impressed with their knowledge and the way they worked their inscriptions, I was not fully convinced how they managed to attain such high social standing. I know more than them and I only read a couple of manuals. So, I needed to have them spill the beans. Yet my small talk tactics to switch the topic back to their source of knowledge had been stunted due to the presence of a rather arrogant kid. A boy, not even in his 20s, came to us, and alongside him were a retinue of beautiful girls, some with chests comparable to melons and thighs that would make the most pious of monks have lecherous thoughts. They wore scanty clothes and strong fragrances. This was lust and sex rather than a group of girls following a young man. The 3 craftsmen stood and bowed deeply to the boy, surprising me as I was too slow to act. Why not bow? The kid said to me, as I was busy munching on a piece of chicken thigh. The 3 men panicked as they noticed I was still eating. Shit, here it comes, this guy is probably someone important and now he's going to cause a scene in this restaurant. I'm too old, if I were to stand up and bow, I fear I might fall on my face, perhaps ruin your appetite. I gave the most ridiculous of excuses as to why I wasn't so fast in bowing. But that didn't seem to impress the kid. He was about to speak when he noticed that I was actually eating with my gloves still on. Something the other inscribers have definitely noticed but didn't dare speak their minds about it. Still, as he didn't know who I was, he spoke his mind. Why are you wearing your gloves? You have no manners to eat in this establishment. It's reserved for royalty and people of great demeanor and interest, and looking at you, I fail to see you have any decorum. The kid spoke in one breath. I don't dare show what lies under my covered self, it would make everyone here gag and I don't wish to show the sight of my ugly self while people are eating, I said. Nonsense, appearances don't matter, all that matters is power. Are you so afraid to show yourself that you hide behind such excuses? Show your hands, the kid ordered. I really hate this brat, but it's all on him. I have already said that it will cause unease in the hearts of those present here, but if you wish, I stood up, removed my gloves revealing the disgusting pustules on them while removed the hood, showing the gaping hole in my eye, and the numerous tumors growing all over my face, hands, and neckline. Immediately, One of the girls that were behind this kid fainted, and a few people who have been enjoying the food and were paying attention to our conversation started vomiting. The kid was struck aback. By the gods, what atrocities have you committed to having the heavens punish you so? Guards, the kid shouted as guards came rushing in. Apprehend this fiend. A vein was about to pop in my forehead. This brat just came in, demanded respect without presenting himself, and audaciously tried to have me show something I already told him was not a good sight in this place. Then asked the guards on me. I'm really tempted to go all MC on his ass and to hell with the consequences. But I have to stop and think for a while. I held up my hands and waited for the guards to surround me. You fiend, you don't even have words to defend yourself, the kid asked. If words had any value to you, I said while scowling, you wouldn't have forced me to reveal my ill skin, so why speak words to someone who won't listen? If you wish to take me, then do it. I'll explain myself to someone who will actually listen. I reprimanded. You. Do you know who I am? To dare speak to me like this? The boy said as he pointed at me. This you's name is Shen Bao, I said. But the kid failed to understand what I meant. The three craftsmen next to me proved to be as useful as a band-aid trying to keep a cracked wall holding up together. They never uttered a word, and it seemed that unless they were addressed, they won't speak their minds. I don't care who you are, you dared insult a high-ranking noble, you deserve to hang, the kid said. My lips began shaking. I was really tempted to use a poison breath right here and then, but with the number of guards this kid has, it would be no-brainer that he could have a few powerful cultivators nearby trying to protect him. I conned myself and said, I have said what I had, now do what you want. It was your own hastiness that caused this scene, not mine. I said. You, the kid said once again, and I was really getting pissed. A man came into the establishment. He was wearing a red cultivator robe with a dark satin belt around his middle. The man had his hands in his sleeves and walked with sure steps. His beard was long and reached all the way to his chest, while his hair was wrapped in a man bun and wrapped in a golden brace. Still a great portion of it cascaded down his back and shoulders, giving him a noble presence. And took a look at everything happening before he said, You son, what's going on? The man said. This foul fiend has caused me to lose face, the kid said. The man looked at me and frowned. You don't seem like a person regretting what he had done. The old man said. I don't regret speaking my mind, I have not offended anyone, but the child took offense after forcing my hand, I replied. The man didn't understand. But before I could explain, the kid was about to blabber some nonsense when his uncle stopped him with a finger, shushing the kid. Speak, what truly happened? The man addressed me. I sighed before I recounted everything that happened in detail. The man turned to the three craftsmen next to me and asked, Zian Yufan, is what this man spoke the truth? The bald man looked at me, and the kid, and with a hesitant nod he said, Yes, all that Brother Shen Bao had spoken was true. I wish not to take part in this, I have spoken only due to Lord Shisun had ordered. The old man said, and extracted himself from the conversation as to not further offend the little kid. The uncle, Shisun, looked at the kid with a disgusted look. Not only did you not act as a true noble, you actually barged into a table, forced a man to reveal his flaws, and then condemned him to death just because he was sick. Have you no shame? The uncle slapped the kid on the face and shouted. Get your harlots and your sorry ass out of my sight. The words were spoken with wrath behind them, and the kid scurried away with the girls behind his tail. He then turned to the rest of the guests. I hope that none take offense of what just happened, nor should you take fellow cultivator Shen Bao's sight to disgust. He had been poisoned, as it is apparent from his misfortune. It is of no fault of his. A brave man such as this person is able to stand while enduring the bone and body grinding poison is something that one needs to be praised for, and not scoffed at. Damn, everyone knows the bone and body grinding poison. I truly admire a person with such strong resolve, though you have few years to survive, and I am more than certain many in your situation would rather slit their own throat than suffer the constant grinding pain of the bone and body grinding poison. You seem rather comfortable and even able to move about. I say you have found peace with yourself, thus finding it easier to move about with such pain. Shisun spoke in all piousness. Yep, too good to be true. This guy is not someone I should trust, but right now I can't afford to reject his goodwill. Thank you, Lord Shisun. I was born with a good fortitude and mindset. I'm able to block the pain, but like you said, I don't have much longer to live. Thus, fearing death or arrogant unjust nobility isn't in me. And so should everyone. Once one sees injustice, one must speak against it. I'll speak to my brother to rein my nephew in place. As for you and everyone here, due to my nephew's behavior, I'll happily take the bill for all of your tables. The men said, further gaining reputation points with everyone here in the room. This guy is dangerously cunning, I gotta keep watch when around him. The men approached us and said, a gathering of 3 genius master craftsmen and the bold brother Shen Bao, what's the occasion of it? Shi-sun said. Oh, we came here to celebrate with brother Shen Bao. He had enlightened us to some knowledge we failed to see and we wish to reward him, but it seems that we caused too much trouble for him. The man, Shi-sun's eyes twitched, it was obvious, this guy was still trying to curry favor with me while he kept his gullet shut when I was under the scope. Pretty opportunistic, but still, even if everyone knows it, no one would speak it, everyone likes to stroke their own ego in public. Right, I guess that brother Shen Bao is also a master craftsman of great renown. To be able to impress these 3 professionals must mean that your knowledge is superior. Shi-sun tried to create a little bit of strife just to see how we would react. Normally any man would humbly decline such a statement and still make it seem like what Shi-sun said was true. No, actually, I still need much to learn. The 3 gentlemen here could have easily discovered a flaw I noticed, I was merely lucky. They have shared much of their knowledge that I'm still impressed and wish to learn from. Not only humble, but you even included everyone with you. I say you're a good person to befriend. Shi-sun said. Seeing how just you are, I say it would be my greatest honor to befriend someone such as you, I said, throwing the praise ball back at his court. We kept talking and exchanging small talk until Shi-sun decided that it was enough time spent in pleasantries. He then said, I managed to get my hands on a strange artifact, and seeing that the 4 of you are gathered here, I'd like to invite you to see it. It's heavily inscribed and none of my personal inscription masters managed to discover the secret behind it. Perhaps a master craftsman can find out how this thing was built and show us a way to unlock this box. Shi-sun said. We'd be happy to have a look, Baldy Xian said. Right, if you're done with your food, please follow me. The 3 of us stood up and Shi-sun didn't let us pay for our own lunch. We followed after him until we reached the city's pavilion. With Shi-sun's identity as a high-ranking noble married to an imperial consort, he has the right to access most of the pavilion's floor, and when we arrived on the 7th floor of the pavilion, he took us inside to a small room where there was a small metallic bronze square placed neatly on the table. This is a bronze cube we found in a dungeon. We tried to refine it to no avail, and didn't manage to understand the inscriptions on it. It took me a great deal of time before I finally gave up and brought this to your eyes. Tell me if you see anything out of the ordinary. The 3 master craftsmen all went to the cube and began inspecting it, carrying it, and picking it up. But I didn't move. I already had a vague idea of what this was, all thanks to the information the Poison God's book gave me. Seeing my inaction, Shi-sun looked at me and said, you seem rather calm, do you know what is this? Not really, but I don't wish to waste time. Presumably, you already showed this to many others before us. I asked. Yes, replied Shi-sun. So they definitely have notes, can I see them? I asked. Right, the men said and handed me a ledger full of notes written by other people who had looked at this cube. This whole book fiasco was nothing but a ruse I used. This would show that I was actually a bright move. It will show that I didn't want to waste time finding things other people had already discovered and noted in the book. Once I went through the ledger, I went towards the cube. The other craftsmen had already gave up. The symbols on it were too complex, but it didn't have any seams or cracks that could be used to open it and uncover what's inside it. I see, I said as I looked at the cube. The other craftsmen and Shi-sun all paid attention to where my finger was going. I touched the middle part of the cube, poured a bit of poison chi on it, then removed my hand. I then flipped the cube and did the same, putting just small bits of chi in separate and random spots, but these spots were all inscribed with a small chi gathering symbol. Once all sides had been injected with chi, the cube vibrated then jerked. Heavens! This is the first time this thing reacted. Shi-sun was actually impressed. This caused the rest of the craftsmen to feel dejected, but they were still excited to see what this box hid. I relaxed and sat back down, not continuing any further. What's wrong, brother Shen Bao? Shi-sun asked. I can't open it, at least not right now. The box has a private chamber inside it that's locking the whole mechanism. It also reacts poorly to sunlight. It has too many receptors. It also needs a powerful cultivator to power up, at least someone above a nascent soul cultivator. I said my words, though the rest of the craftsmen couldn't make heads or tail of what I said. Shi-sun smiled. He understood the meaning behind my words. if one were to carefully deduce what I just said, they'll understand that I already know how to open it and would rather do it in a private chamber, and at night time, without any receptors as in any of the 3 people around us. Shi-sun was a cunning man and immediately understood what I mean. Right, then I'll see what I can do. I'll inform you if the box was ever opened, and I'll be sure to reward you all if we manage to find something special. The rest of the group understood the meaning. Bane Shi-sun, it was time for us to leave. And when I did leave with the group, Shi-sun was fast and inconspicuous in hiding a jade in one of my sleeves. He didn't mean to spy on me but rather gave it to me to contact him. I left the room with the 3 craftsmen as we discussed the cube and went down to the 2nd floor of the pavilion. The 3 asked me how I managed to unlock it, and I only mentioned that I came from a different place and I managed to understand some of the symbols because we used them, but actually those symbols are used by cultivators beyond the ascendant realm. What is an ascendant treasure doing in a place such as this? A question I couldn't answer. But no matter the secret that cube is hiding, it's far too dangerous for any one of our cultivation realms. Once we were in the 2nd floor, where the craftsmen usually hanged out, I pulled out the gourd that Xian Yufan had gave me and began removing the old inscriptions. Once all the symbols were removed, I began by editing and rewriting the correct sequence, all under the gaze of the 3 craftsmen. They took notes and were all nodding at every symbol I changed. Amazing, to see someone with such immaculate accuracy in writing. The restriction on the gourd leave much to be desired in our own experience. The oldest of the craftsmen, Han Xiao, said. Right, the precision is immaculate. I'm really jealous of how Brother Shen Bao has a steady hand. You really are a dragon among the craftsmen. I only had more time in doing this. I smiled at the 3 while I continued writing the symbols as fast as possible. I didn't want to get delayed much. Once I was done, and thankfully I didn't need to add anything complex to the gourd such as weight distribution control command or even a balance and chi regulation inscription, I only needed to add to the size growth inscription and flight inscription, which all had the basic inscription already written. I only needed to rewrite some and link everything so that it will all work. Unlike a puppet that uses spirit stones to power itself, this gourd would use the chi from the user that is riding on it to move, so I didn't need to have a lot of details written. After 3 hours of diligent work, I managed to finish the gourd and handed it back to Xian, who in return gave me the 3 spirit stones I needed. The other 2 had also given me their own high-grade spirit stones, and now I had 5, exactly the number I needed for each and every slot in my puppet. Smiling happily, I left the room, thanking the group. I'll need to go back home. Now that I have these stones, I can finish my project, I said to the 3. Thankfully, they were tact in not asking what I was working on. Everyone had their secrets and no one was going to pry on mine. Once I was home, I hurried downstairs and pulled out my puppet. It had several dozen inscriptions written on it. Instead of the boring monotonous pink color of the puppet, the inscription on it were so numerous it looked like tattooed skin. I had to dye the puppet. The dye will act as a coating to cover the inscription and will not hinder the interlaying works. But before dyeing it, I needed to make sure this thing works. I placed a single high-grade spirit stone in the puppet's chest and the whole damn thing stood up. It didn't even need for me to add the rest of the spirit stones. Thanks to the fact that I made the whole construction interfunctional, meaning that even if the spirit stone on the puppet's shoulder was the only one functioning at a time, it could send energy to the rest of the puppet. This was great. The whole construct could work with just one high-grade stone, but I don't want to overtax the spirit stone, so I placed the rest of the spirit stones on the other spots. Now, 2 high-grade spirit stones, 1 in each shoulder, another 2, 1 in each thigh, and the main one in the chest. The puppet was fully functional, but as it seems, the puppet started shaking. The energy from the high-grade spirit stones was too much. It would probably cause the puppet to blow up. I immediately tapped on the puppet's head, rearranging a few symbols to have the puppet dial down on power consumption. The puppet only needed 10% of the total energy coursing through it to function at full capacity. So, there was no need to exhaust the spirit stones for no reason. Good, I said, then ordered, X, punch that wall. I pointed. Not even a fraction of a second later, the puppet had already torn through the wall with a punch powerful enough that it shook the whole building. And that was 10%, and I could swear it was at least 4 times as fast as when I first saw this puppet in that cave. Ha 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 ha. I laughed like a madman, seeing how amazingly powerful this puppet is, made my efforts, and the months I spent not go to waste. Just as I was about to give it more commands, I remembered that it was midnight and I still had the jade in my pocket. I placed it against my forehead and imprinted in it my location, then went upstairs and threw the jade out of the window. It didn't take more than a few minutes before a man appeared in the front of my door. "Greetings, Brother Shen Bao, are you ready to go?" Shi-sun said. "Yeah, let's go," I said in a smile. "Do you have a flying treasure you can use?" Shi-sun asked once I arrived next to him. "Yes, but I'd rather not pull any unwanted attention, the laws against flight and such." I trailed off, hinting at how this city forbade flight within it. "Not currently, no. That treasure, as you have mentioned, needed the power of a nascent soul cultivator. Though I am such a cultivator, I dare not risk unlocking the content of the box in a city filled with experts lest one of them senses it and scry upon us using their divine sense." Shi-sun explained. "I agree. Then, where do you wish we open the box?" I asked. "I have a location in mind, please follow me," Shi-sun stated, and we both left, headed to the city's gate. Once away from the gate and off praying eyes, Shi-sun pulled out a flying sword from his pouch and hopped on it. I did the same. Thankfully I had the decency of mind to actually think beforehand and place the flying sword in a pouch that belonged to one of those cultivators from the Poison God's cave. Once I pulled the sword, I stepped on it, while noticing the ogling gaze of Shi-sun. Now, here, that was dangerous, mainly because, if what he said was true, and I doubt it would be a lie, he is a nascent soul cultivator, which means he is at least 2 great realms stronger than me, and even a small layer is a difference between heaven and earth among cultivators, not to mention a realm that has 9 layers. So, any sane man should now be shaking in fright, thinking that this nascent cultivator had been interested in their treasure. For anyone besides me, they would have offered the sword in peace just to preserve their lives. But I was rather immune to such threats, even if they were probably unfounded. And I had 2 strong reasons that would keep me safe. The first, without me, Shi-sun would never be able to unlock the box. And the second is simple enough, I just finished making a puppet that kicks ass. Though I don't know if it could fare well against a nascent cultivator. 1 punch at 10% is strong enough to break a reinforced wall. No matter how strong that man's body, a punch from my puppet will hurt. "Let's go," Shi-sun said after what he deemed enough time spent ogling my treasure while I didn't adhere to his gaze. The 2 of us flew south, and we continued the pace. But after a few hours of constant flight, I had to start popping pills before I became too suspicious. Simply put, I'm a foundation establishment cultivator. While he was a nascent soul cultivator, he would have greater spiritual chi reserves and would be able to support his flight, while my chi reserves should diminish. If I were to showcase that I was still fully capable of matching and keeping up with his speed, then roots of greed would sprout in his spirit. And the last thing I want is to give a stronger person more reasons to want my things. "Junior Shen Bao," Shi-sun said, "should we slow down? I don't wish to see you exhausted before our trip reaches its end." "No worries, I have enough pills to keep this pace for a few days." It was a blatant lie. Even if my flying sword was eating up my poison chi like mad, I still had enough energy to keep this pace for weeks. Apparently, the time I spent cooped up inscribing wasn't for naught. As a side effect, a positive one, I'm able to make full use of my chi using my mind's eye, an insight that I passively gained after days upon days of constant concentration on inscription. Now it came in handy, micromanaging the energy that I'm expending, and using the minimum of it to its maximum potential in powering the sword. As for the pills I was eating, they were just some weak poison pills that I found in one of the cultivator pockets. It doesn't do me any harm to have a snack while flying. Yet even while popping those pills like Tic Tacs, I have yet to break through the next layer. I'm surprised to have spent so much time in the first layer of foundation establishment, but I can't be too rash about it. At least for my earlier progress I had the sect master of the Purple Cloud sect as a poison source to power me up. As for now, I'll have to settle for lesser poisons. Hours after hours of flight, the first light of dawn breaks before Shi-sun mentioned that we arrived. Though I don't know why we had to get so far from the capital, I won't be judging him. At least right now I don't know the range of a nascent soul cultivator's divine sense. But at this distance, I doubt anyone from the capital would have range enough to spy on us. There was a small cottage built in the middle of nowhere, right under a large oak tree in what seemed to be a thinly packed forest. We entered the cottage and Shi-sun invited me to a dusty seat. I wiped it as much as I could before sitting, and once I was on the chair I took a moment to survey my surrounding. The cottage was old, perhaps it belonged to Shi-sun or some person that didn't come here in a long time. Also seeing that it still had its wares and wasn't infringed upon by some random animal or someone seeking shelter, it comes to mind that this place had been abandoned for a long time. Shi-sun waved his hand and the dust on the table, chair, and all the wares in this small hut was swooped out the door. Neat trick, I could learn this, at least this would help clean up the house that Zafin had gifted me. Back to our topic, I'm getting distracted. Shi-sun placed the cube in front of me and said, "Can you unlock it?" "Yes, but I'll require your aid." The bit about a nascent soul cultivator I said was true. Without thicker spiritual chi, I can't put enough energy to power this thing up. I answered. Right then, what am I supposed to do? Shi-sun politely asked. You see this symbol here? I pointed at the centermost symbol in the box. You need to pour in your spiritual chi in it and at the same time supply all other 5 faces of the cube the same amount of energy. Once the cube is sated, it will release its locking mechanism and display what's inside it. I replied. The man nodded and began pouring his energy into the cube. After a few seconds of no visible change, Shi-sun frowned, thinking that I lied to him and was probably trying to drain his energy to kill him, or so his expressions portrayed. But soon enough the cube began shuddering, proving that what I said was true, and the frown on Shi-sun soon turned to an expression of excitement and anticipation. The more the cube shuddered, the more Shi-sun poured his energy, and after a while and what seemed to be an exhausting amount of spiritual chi wasted into the unsatiated cube, the small 6-faced little black hole opened up. The cube's faces fell to the side, revealing nothing inside them, to the disappointment of Shi-sun. There is nothing inside, he said, angered yet huffing with exertion. His exhaustion proved him a person of a prudish mind, yet I couldn't fault him. He sees himself as a weak person right now with all the expenditure, and at risk. No, there is everything, I corrected. The treasure isn't supposed to be inside the box, but the box itself. I took the 6 faces of the cube and placed them next to each other, making a rectangular piece. Look, I said as I poured a smidgen of my chi on the cube's faces. The chi spread along seamless and invisible lines along the cube's interior faces, drawing a map that shone in a dim green aura, my poison aura. This, fascinating. Shi-sun said. I kept gazing at the map, unable to determine where this location could be. Shi-sun interjected. I know this mountain, it's Luo Luo Mountain, it's a few days' travel west of here. This also, I believe I know this region. The man contemplated as he shared his thoughts. Come with me, I'd like to discover this place alongside a smart person such as you. That's the most blatant lie I have ever heard in my life. Simply put, this man deduced that if the map required such effort and smartness to understand, then the location that this map pointed to would require the same mental exertion. Thus, if he were to abandon me and go alone, he was bound to get stuck in some sort of trap that his brain can't figure out. I'd be delighted to come along, I replied. After all, I have no way to refuse him. Even if I'm fully capable of annihilating him using X, I'd rather keep X a secret. After all, it would be best to have this man exhaust himself in whatever location this map leads to than if I had to rely on myself to do all the manual work if I were to kill him here and now. Shi-sun then pulled a pill and popped it in his mouth. It didn't take more than a second before he was full of energy. Thankfully I didn't try anything stupid. Now that I know even after he had exhausted himself fully, he still had a pill that can invigorate him. If I were to stupidly attack him while he was weak, nothing less than a killing blow would be enough to save me from his retaliation. Shi-sun pulled his sword and flew in the direction of the Luo Luo Mountain. And after days of constant exhausting travel, we arrived at the said location. It was an open plain with nothing impressive about it, and following the traces on the map, there was supposed to be an entry to a cave somewhere around this region. A wave of pervasive energy shot through me. It lingered for a fraction of a second before shooting off in the distance, and in that fraction of a second, I felt myself naked against the gaze of such a powerful entity. So that's divine sense, I construed. Frowning, the man looked at me and said, I can't seem to find anything here. My divine sense isn't detecting any cave entrances. The man said. We'll have to manually look for it, and seeing this large swath of plains, it's going to take a while. Though I'm unable to use divine sense, I wouldn't be surprised that you couldn't find it, otherwise others would have, I said. Then what do you suggest? He asked. Well, could you use your divine sense once again, and instead of focusing on detecting areas to access, try and find areas that your divine sense can't protrude through, I replied. Smart, by locating areas where I'm unable to see with my divine sense we can heavily reduce the areas we need to search. Luckily there was only one area, there, Shi-sun pointed. It was a large boulder among many others, that had a lot of grass growing around it. It did look like a part of this scene, but so would anything be if one wanted to hide it in plain sight. The rocks shouldn't bounce off my divine sense, I should be able to see through them, but if you hadn't voiced your opinion I would have disregarded them as regular rocks. Now that I think about it, I should have at least been able to see at least a few meters within the rocks. Damn, if divine sense can see through rocks, that would be the most unfair advantage in a hide-and-seek game, where you hide from death and the man seeks to kill you. I should really mind not pissing off someone with a divine sense, because not even hiding underground can save me. Or at least finding a way to hide from the divine sense. I added a mental note on studying divine sense and finding ways to avoid detection. Such methods would help greatly in keeping me alive. For now, I'll have to rely on X and hope that his badass power punch is enough to make Shi-sun regret turning his back on me if it ever happens. Well now, what am I waiting for? Let's go explore a cave that was probably created by an ascendant. How hard can it be? Once we came down, we were stopped in our tracks while we gazed at the rocks. There was no seeming entrance to the said caves. If it weren't for Shi-sun's confirmation that these rocks weren't natural, no one could ever be able to convince me otherwise. I thought high, hard and low on where the entrance to these rocks could be, but came to no favorable answer. Should I break them and risk the probability of destroying the entrance? There are too many variables and things at risk. Perhaps this could even be a test that we need to figure out before entering. I say we spend a little bit of time contemplating, thinking about all possibilities before acting rashly, then suffering consequences we don't want. After all, this is a cave made by an ascendant. I spoke. I'm surprised you know about the ascendant stage of cultivation. It's rare to find people with such vast knowledge even when they're still young cultivators. Shi-sun said while delivering a stab in between his words, stating that I'm far weaker for my knowledge. He might as well say that I was actually tightening the noose around my neck, but better keep my paranoia in check. Now I need to focus. I got closer to the boulder formation and deduced that if there was going to be an entrance, there should be a gate, and most rocks here were too small to act as a gate, besides the largest one among them. I slowly climbed up and tried to understand how this boulder would act as a gate while it looked like a completely ordinary oversized tall boulder. Then it hit me like a train. And I grinned. I climbed down and took a few steps back. I think I figured it out, I replied. Shi-sun waited for me to answer. Here, the grass, why is it this small? It should have been thick and overgrown, yet it never went past this area. Then that bird's nest, it doesn't look natural. Most birds would usually lay their nests on trees, and their nests won't be as perfectly round as that one. I replied. I don't really understand. This is another form of inscription, a formation, nay, a restriction. It's a puzzle that only those who can see can unlock. I replied. But I fail to see a key to said restriction. Shi-sun said. Because there is no key, I replied and sat down in a meditative state. The men frowned, unable to understand. This is actually a clock. It will open on its own at a certain time, though I don't know when. The large boulder is acting as the clock's longer hand, then you have the other boulders acting as the hours of the day. I presume that when the large boulder's shadow is over the bird's nest, then something will happen. And that didn't seem like it would take a lot of time, as it only took a few hours before the sun moved, causing the larger boulder's shadow to cover the nest, and then I felt a small vibration, almost subtle, but to Shi-sun, it was loud enough that it woke him from his meditation with a wide grin on his face. Yet, his expression disappeared almost immediately when nothing seemed to have changed. I also found myself in a perplexing situation, unable to discern the right way to enter this gate. Shi-sun's pervasive divine sense swept right through the boulders with no signs of any change. But I didn't fall to despair. The bronze plates, can I see them? I asked. And the noble presented them almost too eagerly. Just as I grabbed the plates, trying to see if I could figure something, one of them shone brightly in my hand. On the boulder, there was a seam that I didn't notice before, and it probably was hidden, but the seam was a perfect square. I placed the square shining plate on it and immediately the massive boulder shook and literally opened up like an Iron Maiden. Inside the boulder was a tunnel that led down. Well, that worked, I mumbled. I gave the rest of the plates back to Shi-sun, who eagerly pocketed them and jumped into the tunnel, not giving heed to what possible dangers an ascendant cultivator's cave could entail. I sighed as I followed after him. Jumping inside the small hole within the boulder, I fell down to the dark unknown. Not wanting to die flattened on the ground due to my inability to fly, I unceremoniously pulled out my flying sword and planted my feet above it mid-fall. The sword swooped down and carried my weight with no visible strain. In this darkness, it was a little bit hard to see where Shi-sun was, but not impossible. I pulled my finger and used my green flame, the same flame I used to light my pipe with when I was smoking joyful weed with Elder Yun. The small flame danced as it lit the dark cave in green light. The cave wasn't big, but it was deep. It was like a large well that led down. I descended, while Shi-sun raced forward. He seemed interested in whatever an ascendant's cave would entail in treasures and resources, but I was more curious on why an ascendant would build a cave in such a remote plain area. Once we arrived at the bottom, I saw Shi-sun standing in front of a square platform, frowning. "What's wrong?" I asked. This is a long-range teleportation platform. It needs to be powered with spiritual stones to activate. Though I'm really reluctant to part with them," Shi-sun said. And he was right. Spiritual stones, though useless for me unless I use them to power X, for a regular cultivator they can use them to cultivate. Unlike pills that restore energy, spirit stones can bolster one's inner chi and help them cultivate to higher realms. There are rare pills that can do the same effect, but nothing is as pure as spirit stones. After all, spirit stones are the condensed form of heavenly energy, given shape into small marble-like objects that can power a person with no side effects as would pills and their impurities that they leave in the body. I wish if I could help, but the few spirit stones I already used them for my project. I only have some weak ones, I stated as I pulled out thousands of regular spirit stones that I got from the cultivators that tried to kill me in the poison cave. Good, that's more than enough. Quantity is quality in itself, Shi-sun said as he pulled another 2,000 to my 1,000 spirit stones. Though it pained me to part with so many stones, I wanted to be a part of this expedition. At least now, Shi-sun would feel apprehensive from outright ending my life. At least, he would feel slight guilt now that I'm actually helping him without regard to my wealth. Or so I believe. I still have X ready to go out at a moment's notice if Shi-sun proved a threat, but I should stay passive for now. Shi-sun waved his hand, carrying all the spirit stones and placing them on the platform, which instantly devoured them, turning them to dust and lit up. Several runes shone brightly under the platform. I was fascinated with the complexity of said runes before Shi-sun gestured for me to follow while saying, "Though I respect your need for knowledge, these runes are ancient and would require a lot of time studying, not to mention properly using them. It would be best not to waste time trying to figure these things lest the gate closes," Shi-sun said. But I didn't need to study them right now. I memorized the whole platform, all thanks to my mind's eye, a seriously overpowered ability, though I'm sure every cultivator has it. When it comes to photographic memory, it proved beyond helpful when I needed to study this later on. I stood next to Shi-sun and immediately the teleportation gate lit up, and I felt as if my body was being disintegrated molecule by molecule, and immediately my sight went dark before it was assaulted by a bright pervasive light. Opening my eyes, I found myself in a large swath of green fertile land. I would have sworn that we were ejected outside of the cave if not for the dense heavenly energy that was swirling about in this area. My God, the spiritual energy in here is several folds stronger than back at the capital. Shi-sun stated the obvious. But for me, it didn't matter if it was thick or thin. I can't cultivate spiritual energy, but that's not enough to put a damper on my mood. After all, high spiritual energy means that spiritual herbs are more prone to bloom and blossom in such areas. And the Poison God's book had already sent me a private message, more like telepathic audio, that several herbs could prove useful to me in this area. We should explore the area. Let's split up, and here, Shi-sun said, giving me a jade. If you find yourself in danger, just break this and I'll appear as soon as possible. I wouldn't want you to die on me, not before I repay your help, Shi-sun said in a faithful smile, though I felt it was a blatant lie. He wanted to keep track of me. Perhaps I might get lucky and find something that would interest him. Thank you for your benevolence, I said as I pocketed the jade. After all, I also have my way of dealing with his tracking mechanism. Unless he uses divine sense to look for me, I could easily alter this jade and send him to the wrong location. Though if I find myself in trouble, I won't hesitate in breaking it. Better have him deal with any shenanigans I might encounter than me dying meaninglessly in a bloody ascendant's cave. Damn, sometimes I do some stupid stuff. Still, every dangerous encounter is worth the risks. The treasures that these expeditions award are worth the risks, at least the spiritual herbs. Now, let's see, which way should I head to? I moved through the large swaths of grass and open fields. Trees rose ever so sparingly in this enclosed area, though I have little understanding of if this whole place was a part of this world, or from the stuff I read when I was back on Earth, a separate enclosed dimension. Though unlikely, this place could probably be on some other side of this continent instead of a secret location. But it's never wrong to be careful. This place might be the resting place of an ascendant cultivator, and from what I understand, this could have several trials and tribulations to the people seeking the ascendant's treasures. But I'm not too keen on getting myself killed in seeking treasures of an entity that far surpasses my level of understanding. Risks entail rewards, but the looming threat of death is great, and it would be foolish if I were to throw myself to my death if I were to overestimate my abilities. The poison god mentioned to seek danger and find reward for one's risks, but he also mentioned to be careful, for there is a thin line between courage and recklessness. Only if the risks are worth the effort, and I'm fully capable of surpassing them even at great effort, will I move to obtain what the ascendant has to offer. Otherwise, if only death awaits as I take stupid risks, then I'd rather leave this area than try my already non-existent luck against insurmountable odds. Struck by realization, I finally began to understand better how this whole thing works. Birds die for food and men die for wealth. But I'm able to think pragmatically right now, clear of mind and sharp of focus. I'm able to perfectly judge my current conundrum. It seems that there is something here that's calming my thoughts and making me able to perfectly see reason. As I continued moving through the grasslands, the book vibrated in my chest as my single eye was attracted to a naturally formed spiritual plant that I would have missed for common grass. The spiritual plant looked exactly like the grass next to it, a long single-strand green grass petal. If it were any other person, they would have not given this grass a second look, but this was the fickle blade grass. A 7th-grade spiritual herb that can be used to reinforce medicinal pills. Receptarians would use this to increase the power of their pills. It's a commonly known herb in the domain of alchemy. However, though it is well known, it is extremely rare. And for a good reason. This plant looks, feels and acts like normal grass, though it has a spiritual vein inside it enabling it to cultivate heavenly energy. But the real reason why this thing is so rare because once it births into the world, it will only last for a few days before it will wither and die. Though many didn't understand why this plant would die, from what I got off the poison god's book, he theorized that this plant's very existence is to defy heaven. Weed, or grass, stomped on, chopped, cut, or burnt, will always grow back as long as its roots remain. And this very simple-looking grass is an embodiment of heaven-defying nature. Thus after a few days of its birth, heavens will not tolerate its existence and will cut off all heavenly energy from around it, insulating it from the world and thus dooming its existence. I picked up the herb and placed it inside my bag. Rare are those who manage to obtain a stalk of this thing, but the moment I raised my head, I was surprised to see so many of it just a few feet away. Fickle blade grass grew in abundance in this place. How, or why? It escaped my understanding, but if what the poison god said was true, and judging by the dense heavenly energy in this place, I could also put a few theories of mine to work. First off, this place was a sealed location, meaning that not even heaven can interfere, thus the fickle blade grass had grown to abundance. Secondly, this place is undoubtedly beyond the perception of heaven, thus it's able to thrive in heavenly energy. Although this might sound contradictory, I could guess that there is something in this place that is supplying this small world with heavenly energy, though not heaven itself, perhaps a treasure, or a spirit stone. I don't have any evidence to validate my theories, but it's possible that something is powering this whole place up, against heavenly law. Thus this place is both concealed from heaven, and at the same time has enough heavenly energy within it to allow a myriad of spiritual herbs to grow. Lastly, if one was able to create this place, seal it and lock it from the eyes of heaven, how powerful could they be? The last question was something I did and did not want to be answered. Knowing an enemy's capabilities was half the effort into finding out how to defeat them, but an ant can't kill an elephant even if it knows how strong he is, for the disparity in strength make all efforts nothing but a moot attempt at defying unshaking possibilities of doom. I walked ahead, while plucking all the grass I could find, for all of it is wasted if it were to remain here unattended. I could also use some of this grass into increasing the potency of a lot of my pills, especially poison pills. Though I don't have the ability to start mastering receptarism, as the poison god calls it, or alchemy as the people of this lower realm call it. I can easily dilute a poison pill in a cup of water and add a few drops of extract from the fickle blade grass to increase the poison's potency. I continued moving through the open field, finding even more spiritual plants and herbs. So many of them I felt that it would be a crime if I were to strip this land barren of so many treasures. Though I continued plucking without regard, as every single piece of grass and spiritual herb would only go to waste if no one took them. But I still kept my bearings about me. There was something that I should not forget due to greed. I made sure that for every 10 stalks of grass I gathered into my poison god's book, I placed 1 stalk into my holding bag. For reasons that I wish would never happen, but one cannot be too careful. I kept gathering the herbs and continued moving until I noticed one small little detail that became as apparent as a sore thumb after a while. I've spent several hours on this field, but the sun never moved an inch. Thus giving me two options. The first, I was probably trapped in a restriction that I didn't notice, an illusion where my soul is stuck in this heaven of spiritual herbs while my body is about to be ravaged by some odd monstrosity. Quite a far-fetched theory, but this is a cultivation world and such scenarios wouldn't be too unthinkable. The second was a confirmation that this place is nothing but a created domain, a world with stagnant natural phenomenon, where the sun, the ground, and even this soulless breeze that keeps moving were all artificial and manufactured. But if all of this was fake, how could the spiritual herbs thrive? Heavenly energy was such a wondrous thing that it would defy the natural order and make a world against laws. I sighed as I had no way to confirm either suggestion and continued on my merry way gathering herbs, comforted by the fact that the Poison God's book never spoke of hidden dangers. After more tiresome hours of gathering herbs, enough hours actually until my back started to hurt from picking them up, I found myself in front of a lake. A blue stagnates lake, where not even its waters rippled. But the water in it looked as stagnant as a mirror's surface. For the life of me I was unable to understand why it didn't rot over and turn into a disgusting rancid quagmire. After all, the natural alignment should have affected the stagnant pond, or at least have some algae grow on the pond. This pond felt unnaturally natural, and it somehow irked me. Yet, due to its clear and crystal surface, I was able to see something inside the pond. There was a flower the size of a man's fist at the bottom of the lake. Another spiritual herb, and just as I approached the lake, the Poison God's book vibrated in my chest, sending a message directly to my mind. Don't take another step lest you want your life squandered and your soul shredded, for you're in the presence of a soul-devouring bloom. Okay, that's not ominous at all, I said to myself. But to my dismay, even if I didn't take another step heeding the book's command, somehow, the lake shuddered and ripples moved along its surface. Heck, I was complaining that this thing wasn't acting as a natural lake, and now that it does, I feel hella more worried. Especially since said flower shot up from within the lake. Though I say flower, it was sitting on top of the head of a jade serpent the size of a high-speed train. And the serpent didn't look too pleased with my ugly self. I'm too old for this shit, I cursed as I saw the massive behemoth open its mouth wide, ready to swallow me whole. The train-sized snake wasn't too keen on greetings and immediately dove at me, head first, fangs ready to gouge me whole in a best-case scenario. At least it would beat being chomped on and chewed to bits before turning to a gigantic cultivating serpent poop. I urged my frail old body to dodge to the side. Say I urged here because against mortals like back at the bandit's cave, I was strong and all-powerful. The disparity between a cultivator and a normal human being was vast, exactly as vast as the situation between me and the snake, where I was the mortal in question and the snake was the cultivator. My feeble attempt at a decent dodge still awarded me with a rather lucky escape from the jaws of death, even if momentarily. As the snake had bitten through the dirt, digging several metric tons of it out of the ground in a single bite, then spat it out to the side in a rumble of dust and stone that rose up to the high heavens, then focused its eyes back at me ready for another attempt at my life. Shit. Now, I could be strong compared to a mortal, but if the jade-colored snake was to have me in between its jaws instead of the massive dirt pile that it just spat, I'd be hard-pressed to worry about coming out of the incident with a few broken bones. I'm in way over my head, and I know it. I have two options. The first, run, which is super dumb considering the serpent is faster, stronger, and has impressive agility, a huge contrast to its massive train-sized self. The second option is to fight, and even if it does sound even dumber than the first option, it's my best one. Though I know for certain that even if this snake were to sleep right in front of me for 100 years as I hacked away at its hide, I'll be satisfied if I were to break a single one of its scales during that period. Shit is impossible to beat and I know of it, yet, there was only one way to come on top. Using X. Now here come my concerns. I don't know if Shi-sun is observing me, but if I don't act, I'll definitely end up dead. And since he didn't show himself the moment the snake had appeared, then he either doesn't care if I live or die, or he has no idea I'm in great peril. I'll bet on the second option because the first is too grim to think about. I jumped back while the serpent shot at where I stood, only missing by a hair's breadth as I got assaulted by all the dust and debris that were the result of its second chomp on the ground. For the life of me, if I was just a bystander, I'd think that the ground was made of tofu instead of solid dirt dust and rocks. I tapped twice on my chest as X shot forward from the Poison God's book, This was X's debut fight and I pitted him against a demonic beast for his first battle. A great risk, a stupid one even, because I haven't fully calculated its full capabilities. Side form a powerful punch against a wall, I have no idea where X's limits lay. And if that punch against the wall was impressive, Snaky here made chomping on the ground look like he was taking a bite out of a cack. Still, X never failed to impress me. The automaton immediately took action, knowing exactly what to do without even having to tell it that I need to be protected. Not out of luck, no, I had already inscribed perception, awareness, and a deduction inscription within it, though not the most complex, but enough for him to understand that snake equals danger, X kill danger. A simple equation that made great results. X didn't dodge the incoming charge, as the snake was about to bite right through it. And where I saw the puppet standing in wait for the incoming charge, my heart wrenched at the prospects of losing X, but the puppet surprised me as it grabbed the snake by the thong. Thanks to the massive spiritual chi expenditure from the high-grade spirit stones powering it, X's strength rose to match that of the snake and above, as it stopped the snake in its tracks like a reinforced concrete block would do to a car. Utterly and completely immovable, X stood on his grounds, while the snake panicked at being pinned by the fangs. The snake coiled around itself, though it couldn't move its mouth, its tail was still able to move, and it was about to use it to swat X like an annoying fly. I moved several paces away. The battle between these two is not something I could join or even survive if I was in the vicinity, so I had to leave the stage for X. The serpent's tail came down like a god's whip about to punish a heretic servant, but the puppet released one hand from the snake's fangs, and even with one hand, X still kept the snake pinned. X then tucked his hand under his armpit, then punched forward, meeting the snake's tail with a sound-breaking punch. A loud thundering explosion echoed as tail and fist met, and neither buckled. I was impressed with the outcome. X didn't spare any chi using his punch, though he didn't use the full power from the spiritual stone as it would destroy his hand from the sheer chi within the high-grade spirit stone. X used the most chi he could use without damaging his hand from chi overload. And that was about 35%, not of the total chi inside the spirit stone, but 35% of the chi that the spirit stone would passively release. And that clash had caused the snake to feel threatened as the slits of its eyes shook in apprehension. Sensing that the puppet grabbing it by the thong was strong enough to contend with its hardened tail, the snake tried its best to escape, only to be pinned down once again by X as he grabbed the second thong with his now slightly damaged fist. The snake raised its tail again, attempting to swat X once again, but the puppet was smarter. It had already deduced that if they were to repeat the same scenario, he will not come on top. The damage to his hand was a clear indication that his durability was slightly below the snake. Not a fault of his, but the material that made X. So as before, the serpent's tail would come down on the puppet, but X pulled the snake towards him. Then, as if X was human, I'd swear it heaved as it jerked the whole damned creature above its head, then slammed it on the ground behind him, cratering the ground, while I almost lost my footing due to the reverberations from the impact. X had smashed the snake on its back, then stomped on its upper jaw that was now stuck in the ground. He then clutched the other jaw with two powerful grips, a single forceful twist and pull, and the snake's lower jaw was ripped out of its socket, leaving the snake hissing and flailing in complete pained agony, while showing X in a burst of crimson blood. Not even bothered by the boiling blood that melted the grass under his feet, X unceremoniously threw the lower jaw away and grabbed at the snake's forked tongue, ripping it from its socket, causing untold pain to the snake. Though the snake's hide was as strong if not stronger than X's body, its internal organs weren't as durable. And X abused that fact to vicious savagery. One would even feel sorry for the snake if one were to see how it flailed around, in agonized but unvoiced pain. X reveled in the pain throes of the snake until he finally believed the snake to be deserving of mercy. He dove his fist right at the snake's upper jaw, and right into its brain, where the snake flailed one last time before it slumped to the ground, forever unmoving. The moment the snake was dead, X stood up, and stood still, deeming that no danger presented itself. The puppet stood at attention waiting for further instruction. Holy crap, I cursed. Honestly, this was a surprising outcome. I never thought that X would have such power. And it was damn impressive and comforting. Still, there was much to do, so much to fix. First of all, X had a lot of power, too much power in fact. Not that it was a bad thing, but his body had received a lot of damage, mostly from X's own expenditure of chi than the damage from the battle, as the snake had failed to even land a single blow on X. The damage was mostly dealt with his hands and shoulders. A few nicks and strained fingers. He was made of metal, but metal can bend, and due to the power behind him, his body became oddly shaped even if slightly. He was now favoring his right leg over his left, and his torso was slightly tilted from the force pulls. If he was made of flesh, his current predicament would be the same as a person who had pulled his muscles, only he pulled his muscles enough that they ripped. An automaton he was, X still suffered an injury, and it would hinder his action if left unfixed. I waved my hand as I pulled X back into the Poison God's book. So far, there was no news from Shi-sun, nor did he show his face. The battle wasn't soundless, so if he had sensed the chi expenditure, he would definitely know that I've been fighting and would come to investigate. So, I'm better off hiding my trump card. As for the snake, I sat down, contemplating what to do with it. It was huge, powerful even, and looking at its fangs I could say that they could prove worth a few coins. I thought against using my poison to consume the snake as I didn't need any poison chi right now and it would be useless to waste such a corpse. I needed to study this snake. Even if it had died to X, it had a hide strong enough to sustain a full blow from X. That was enough for me to take interest in its skin. Better skin the snake and use the skin, sell it or craft something with it than waste it using the green poisonous aura that would serve nothing as I'm neither exhausted nor in dire need of poison chi. So, I waved my hand once again and had the Poison God's book suck in the snake inside it, preserving it for later along with the flower atop it and the tongue and the lower jaw that were thrown on the ground. I sat down, trying to calm my excited self. Right now, I felt 50 years younger. I began meditating, reflecting on what just happened, and how surprisingly powerful X is. First things first, I'm weak. This is obvious, to anyone with eyes. I'm no match to the monsters and creatures of this world, and I'm even surprised at my ability to retain my sanity even after I was almost eaten by the huge snake. I'll have to thank the cultivation mindset for this because if I was a regular person, I'd probably shit my pants the moment that snake showed up. The second thing, I'm way in over my head. This mere snake was the first hurdle thrown at me in this Ascendant's cave. There could be more, and definitely fiercer, stronger creature up in the distance, something that mere luck or a damaged X cannot overcome. And finally, I can't leave this place without Shi-sun. Simply because I didn't have the slightest idea on how to. I came to this place thanks to the teleportation platform. But the platform didn't teleport me to another one but rather threw us in a random spot inside this small world. So to leave I must find another teleportation platform and pay the hefty sum of spirit stones to get out. Also, not to mention the small slabs that are in the hands of Shi-sun. One of them allowed us access to this place, so it wouldn't be wrong to assume that one would allow us to leave, or even be the key to some of the possible areas in this small world. Right, let's take a step back. I'm too weak to fight, but I won't give up and just die. I need strength to survive, but it's impossible in the current situation. I can't just up and become an ascendant if I wish hard enough. The world doesn't work like that. Hard work and dedication, and suffering at the hands of the poison plaguing my body. So, that leaves me with what? Prudence, carefulness, and complete understanding of where I am, what I have to do, and where to go. I can't power my way through these hurdles with mere strength. I'm so far lacking in that aspect right now it would be a joke if I were to think I'll survive on my mere foundation establishment cultivation. I'll need to use my wits. Immediately, my mind's gears began spinning. I reevaluated my situation and rethought through it. No exit, no power, but still intelligence and prudence will take one a long way. At least if I were to die, I'll know it won't be because I was headstrong and believed I'm able to fight my way through, but because I wasn't smart enough to navigate the hidden dangers of this place. X is damaged, but I have no way to fix him in this situation. My body is still perfectly fine. I received no injuries and I still have enough chi to move about. I'm not in any immediate danger, but that's no reason to relax. And I need to figure out my next step. Should I wait for Shi-sun, or should I navigate this area all by myself? Though the first choice seems like the best option, I don't trust that noble. Simply because he had too much power for me to pose any real threat, the same as the traps here. I could file him as another hurdle and find a way around him. He is a hurdle that I'm best off avoiding. So, that brings me to my current predicament. What now? All over me are plains that reach all the way to the horizon. The sun never moved, and the sky is slightly cloudy. There is a gentle breeze, but it feels fake. More like the wind from a fan than a cold summer wind. Staying where I am will not change anything, and will only increase the chances of Shi-sun finding me. Not that I'm avoiding him, but if the jade he gave me stays in one place for a long time, he would think that I might have died, or that I'm stuck, giving him reason to come find me. I kept looking around. There was nothing that would indicate my position, no mountains, no trees, and no points of reference besides this pool next to my feet. Which way to go? North, south, west, east? I kept racking my brain thinking where I should go before realizing how idiotic I was. The winds are static, continuous, but the wind is coming from the west, it never subsided, it kept moving. And in this fake world, this wind needed a source, and this source would probably be the center of this place. That's a start, though not the best lead to follow. If I created this place, I'd probably put all the mechanism in the centermost area. I then pulled my sword, sat meditating on it in a lotus pose, and willed it to move forward. Not fast, but not slow either, just in between. I meditated, thinking about my situation and if I were to find myself in a fight against something soon and how to deal with it. Though it wasn't the best way to deal with my current situation, it beats not thinking of anything and worrying about what might be hiding in the grass. Hours upon hours of flight, I finally saw the first sign of change in this world. In the distance, there was at first a protrusion in the horizon. And the longer I flew forward, the more the protrusion looked like a mountain. Good, a mountain, it's a change in scenery. But also, it means that there could be something there, besides the mundane grass. I kept flying forward while gazing at the mountain, taking the sight of it whole. The mountain stood at several kilometers tall, far higher and bigger than anything I had ever seen, and it only grew larger the more I gotten closer to it. And right in the middle of it, the source of the wind came to view. A towering pagoda with 9 stories, and each of these stories was as big and as majestic as the palace in the purple cloud sect. And on top of it, there was a mistake. I say mistake because something didn't seem right. There was a sphere that shouldn't belong there. It was wind, gathering, rotating, and spiraling above the pagoda, then blowing in one single area. East. Where I came from. The pagoda looked immaculate and clean, as if it didn't weather God knows how many eons in this place. No snow, dirt, or dust gathered on the pagoda, and it looked clean. It took me more hours to get to the pagoda's open gate. And looking at the doors, I saw 2 of the slabs making the box that Shi-sun had already placed on the door. Keys. This means that Shi-sun had already arrived here and entered. I took a deep breath and took a step inside the pagoda. Only to be immediately assaulted by a mind-rending vocal message. Welcome to the Laughing Slaughterer's abode. Rejoice, for your trials and tribulations are yet to start. Survive and you shall earn untold might, fail and you shall be doomed to everlasting mediocrity. That is if you remain alive. The message was simple, but it meant that so much danger lurked inside this pagoda that it would be best if I leave. Yet, man proposes, and heaven disposes. The gates of the pagoda lurch closed, locking me inside what seemed to be a gigantic pentagonal wooden platform where it seemed to have no other exit or entry. The walls around me closed and locked me, while the ceiling came down, locking me in a sealed enclosed space that I had no way to leave. And right in front of me, there was a man standing front of me. He oddly looked exactly like me. With the same robes, pustules and hunched back, only his eyes, well, one of them as I was missing an eye, and so was the clone. His eye was red, no irises, not white, just a red glowing eye, and his grin was something that sent shivers down my spine. If I could grin as he did, I'd be damn scary. First trial. 1 against self. For only one's limiter is one's self. Find victory against yourself to see true enlightenment. I didn't move, nor did the clone. I didn't need to act. First of all, I need to understand what the hell is going on. I'm in some laughing slaughterer's pagoda, perhaps his trial area where he tests the cultivation noobs, for lack of a better term. And the first test is a fight against oneself, so I'll need to prove that I can be better than who I currently am to proceed forward. Right now, the clone is not attacking, probably waiting for me to attack first, and if I were to do it, we'll start the battle. I'm not ready yet. I'll need to stay my hand until I'm sure of everything around me. By starting with the setting I found myself in. An octagonal room with a locked ceiling and closed walls, no windows or doors opened. Even the one behind me was tightly locked, and there were no stairs to the next room, so I would have to assume that once I defeat this guy, I'll be able to go to the next stage. Right, assumptions aside, I'll need to know of one thing. I pulled out my sword from behind me, and so did the clone. He pulled out a similar creeping demise. Now that's bad. Because it means that whatever is powering this thing is capable of replicating my stuff, so using X is a big no. I don't want to face a copy of my own puppet. Nor would I risk having my own X fight against the enemy's X, in case mine gets ruined in a meaningless battle of attrition. So, I figured that unless I pull out something from my pockets, the enemy will not have any prior knowledge of the item I own. It would be best if I kept my cards hidden. That's an accidental lesson I learned. So, how do I beat myself? Simple, by cutting my neck. I'm physically weak. Physically weak compared to regular cultivators, mind you, as I can easily dispose of a few hundred mortals without breaking a sweat. But against myself? I'm not too keen on battling this copy, simply put, because I already know how to defeat the clone. This is a test to see if one is able to come to insight in the middle of battle. As one would definitely fight until the bitter end against themselves, and only in this battle where one is equally pitted against his clone would one understand that unless they came to a new insight, a new killing move, or a new skill, that they would be able to defeat the clone. Because only by bettering oneself would one be able to defeat their older self. The idea settled in my mind and I was sure of it. This was the answer to this test. But if I were to fight and not come to a new insight of my battle prowess, then I will be killed here by a clone. But what choice do I have? If I were to stay my hand, wait, then nothing will change. There is no room to back down, and only one way forward. Then, prove myself better than myself is the only option left for me. I took a step forward and so did the clone, then another step, then the clone charged me, with far more speed than I ever believed myself capable of. Still, the attack was predictable, a long sword sweep that I could easily dodge if I were to jump back. Yet, doing so will definitely cause me to be on the backhand, defensive stance. I don't want to do that. If I were to play this battle defensively, then I'll be forced on the defensive from the start, and that's a recipe for disaster. The sweep came close to lobbing my head off, but with a flick of my wrist, creeping demise sprang to action, striking against the length of the clone's sword and parrying it with ease. A good parry. I'm impressed I managed it on the first try, but there was no need for me to be all giddy. I'm in the middle of battle. I followed up, riposting with another flick of the sword, this time slicing at the clone's wrist. The riposte was perfect. As I sliced the clone's wrist, then I saw something strange. The clone's wrist bled, but the blood on it was a clear, healthy crimson. I took a step back. A terrible move in any battle when one has the advantage, but I deemed this was the best move. Simply because, I found a better way to defeating this enemy, especially since what I saw happening right in front of me proved that my action to back off was the best course of action I took. The wrist on the clone healed at astonishing speeds. So, unless I landed a death blow, I would have been stuck in a battle of attrition against an enemy that probably can heal itself indefinitely. I took a deep breath and spat out my poison breath, to which, the enemy did the same, spewing a powerful gust of poison towards me, where I greedily smiled as I opened my mouth wide, gulping back my own poison and the enemy. The action caused the clone to frown and instantly act, as it opened its mouth to suck in the remaining poison. Only for me to bawl out laughing, "Dumb idiot." A statement that proved more than true before the clone began shuddering, shaking, then outright melted in front of me in a puddle of corroded melted flesh. Magnificent display of skill, the laughing slaughterer's voice sounded loud and clear. This simple statement was enough to indicate that this was an automated response to the victor of this stage, and wasn't an actual person watching and speaking directly to me. Otherwise, they'll be asking what the hell just happened, or at least know that it had nothing to do with skill and just luck. The clone was made of human flesh and powered by some sort of mechanism, also it was made in a way that it would perfectly replicate the being that it was cloning. The only difference that it didn't fully copy the enemy's internal body. Otherwise, I would be facing a creature that was really inflicted with the bone and body grinding poison, instead of just the appearance of the affliction such as the pustules and the tumors. A large hole opened up on the ceiling where a spiral case of stairs came spinning down, allowing me access to the upper floor. Then a small pill bottle flew at me. It was fast enough that I didn't realize it was in front of me until it was. "Receive your reward, dress your wounds and go to the second floor, for your test has yet to end," the voice said once again, further confirming this was just a recording. After all, I wasn't wounded to dress any wounds. I took the pill bottle and opened it. A strong spiritual scent assaulted my nose. It was sweet and potent. A mid-grade restorative pill, but to me, it was more like poison. Spiritual pills were useless to me, and a restorative pill will actually try and heal my affliction, which is the poison plaguing me, but in doing so, it will literally destroy me from within, or so I theorized, but I'm better off just keeping this instead of throwing it like the useless trash it is. Once I was on the second floor, I saw that the floor was slightly smaller than the one I was on, but it didn't take from the majesty of the pagoda. Only, instead of the non-existent decoration on the lower floor, this one had a small table with a teapot and a cup ready. Might is right. But what can one do against inconceivable odds? Drink up, cultivator, and show me. The laughing slaughterer''s voice sounded louder this time. I sat down and gulped the cup's content in one single motion. The Poison God's book didn't warn me that it was dangerous, and if it had poison, then I'll benefit from it even. But the drink actually caused my vision to grow woozy, and I found myself lost in a dreamlike state before my eyes focused, where I sat wearing leather armor. Looking at my bare arms, I saw that I had a darkened skin, for someone who had toiled under the glare of the blazing sun far more than anyone should. This was not my body. It was the body of some soldier, as I noticed many others with the same features. Though their faces were blurred, I could see that they talked, laughed, and joked with each other. This was a scene from a battle perhaps. We were in a desert-like environment, where cliffs rose high above us as we were shaded by their sheer size from the blaze of the scorching sun. Tents were pitched as far as my eye could see, but seeing from the ragged clothes and armors of many of these soldiers, even the dead and dying coming in and out of some of the nearby tents, I realized that this could only be the camp of a defeated army. I walked away from where I stood and took another glance at my surrounding. We sat cradled between two high cliffs, and outside these cliffs was sand, reaching all the way to the horizon. The cliffs around us stretched in a long line back, where many, many wounded soldiers marched, slowly funneling away from the camp, while the healthiest of the bunch remained standing where we are right now. Before I wondered why isn't the whole camp moving deeper between the cliffs, a man came rushing in, as he roared out a warning. The enemy is upon us. Prepare for battle, the rider shouted, again and again as he raced through the camp, waking everyone to a grim reality. Though I couldn't see anyone's face, I could feel the rising tension, despair, and outright defeatist morality of the camp. I was but a mere soldier in this battle, and I didn't have my sword, nor my ability to use poison chi, as I didn't feel my meridians no matter how hard I tried to rotate my energy. Back to being a mortal so soon, I grimaced at the realization. Soldiers, rank up. Form a line to hold the enemy. We'll pave way for the wounded to escape, a man with a bristling voice called, his voice booming through the camp and commandeering everyone into action. A group of soldiers gathered up and lined up in front, where the two cliffs stood as natural barricades. The soldiers lined up to defend the only access point to where we stood. A good strategy to limit the number of enemies we'll be facing. Soldier, a loud shout woke me from my stupor as the same man who had called everyone to line up was shouting at me. Looking back, I saw a man in slightly more ornate clothes, a round helm covering his face, and in one of his hands a spear that held a blue bloodied banner. Are you too scared to move your ass? Show signs of cowards and I'll kill you myself before you taste the enemy's steel. I nodded at the men and scurried forward, lining up alongside the other soldiers. So, we're supposed to hold the enemy for the rest of the camp to escape. Pretty desperate, pretty stupid, and outright suicidal. Most of the people around me looked rattled to their cores as the enemy was upon us. Hundreds upon hundreds of horses were charging their way toward us, and with such a flimsy-looking line of soldiers to hold the line, I was certain that we'll be overrun with the first cavalry charge. Now, I'm pretty sure this very test was not tailored towards someone such as me. This was a test for the battle-hungry, sword-happy swinging martial artist who will use their skills in slaughtering as many of the enemy soldiers as they can. This is a test of martial skills, of which I didn't have much knowledge. And since I didn't have any martial skills to speak of, then I'm definitely screwed. God, I wish if I could run along with the still scurrying soldiers unfit to hold the line. Fighting here is outright suicide, and backing away is desertion, rewarded with instant death delivered by the captain himself. I'm too old for this shit. Spears at the ready, the captain shouted at the 10 tightly packed lines holding the entrance to the enclosed space. Archers. Loose, he called as the back line shot arrows that arced their way into the incoming cavalry. A few of the arrows fell harmlessly on the sand, but a good portion struck rider and mount, causing the horses that were rushing at breakneck speeds to falter or outright fall. A horse's tumble was nothing if not catastrophic, as the whole beast would tumble forward crushing the rider above it under its weight. Not to mention, causing a good deal of the riders behind it to stumble to the same fate, crushed under the hooves of their own allies. But the majority of the charging horses knew how to deal with such incidents, as they nudged their horses to jump over the dead and dying bodies of their allies to continue the charge. Spears up. Hold the ranks, the commander called, and the front row raised their spears. Futile as it might be against the charge of heavy cavalry, the spears pierced through horse and rider, while many of the horses charged right through the ranks, swatting allies with vehement savagery. The riders were well equipped for the charge, with long spears, glaives, or metallic polearms. Some even had chain-linked morning stars that they used to swing at the heads of my allies, breaking bone and crushing skulls. The cavalry bore through the ranks like a hot knife through butter, and there was nothing the captain could do to hold the charge, especially since a perfectly aimed spear had cut through the captain's incessant commands, as it bore through his throat. Another soldier hurried to grab not the captain, but the banner. If the banner falls, everyone is doomed. The same soldier shouted orders and the battle continued. One would think that in a battle everyone would be fighting face to face, but it was far from it. Only the soldiers engaged were able to fight, as the rest of the ones behind them waited. There was no room for everyone here to fight, and there was only one thing they could do: wait for their comrades to die before they took their place, or pull them back to relative safety if they are too injured to battle. And second, after an arduous second as I waited, the battle was getting closer to me. I had a scimitar in hand, a little heavy but not discomfortingly so. It rested well in my hand. It was made of low-quality steel, nothing comparable to cultivator weapons, but it was more than enough to slice through the enemy's leather clothes with relative ease if one were to apply a bit of strength. Another spear shot through the soldiers' ranks and pierced through the chest of the soldier that held the banner, only to have the banner fall towards the ground, and if it were to fall, all will end. Yet this damnable banner, as if it had a nasty will of its own, was falling towards me, where I unconsciously grabbed it before it touched the floor. As I had the banner in my hand, a few soldiers looked at me. Though their faces were a blur, I could feel their apprehension, fear, and uncertainty, but most of all, hope that I could lead them out of this miserable situation into an impossible victory, or at least survival. Pull the wounded. I shouted and my voice rang, hold the line, and any able archer keeps shooting your arrows. I called and many followed, comforted by commands. Soldiers fell in line. A weak, barely able to hold itself, but a line it was. And the arrows fell. The arrows managed to subdue the incoming cavalry, where my infantry made quick work of the overly extended cavalry in our ranks. A cavalry ride was great for charging through infantry, but against thick lines of spears and arrows, the cavalry found little success in making more way. Now stuck in the midst of soldiers, they were killed almost instantly. A rider had the height advantage in a group of soldiers, but even if he could fend one or two, when you have half a dozen soldiers surrounding your horse, then you're bound to be impaled. And with the arrows still being loosed on the incoming riders that desperately tried to replenish their overextended cavalry, it was all but impossible to get any closer. The tight enclosure had guaranteed that every horse that had been felled by arrows was an obstacle to subsequent horses, further stopping any cavalry from replenishing their front lines. And with that, the rest of the cavalry were forced to retreat, dooming the few that had charged headfirst into the army. A small victory, and a well-earned rest for my soldiers the moment they made quick work of the few riders that were within their ranks. But that's nothing to throw a celebration for. As in the distance, there was another group of marching soldiers, heavy infantry, walking right through the desert sands. Hot as it was, and insufferable as it was, these soldiers still tided through the blistering heat in their armors. The moment they'll make it here, it will be all but defeat that will await us. Retreat! I shouted, getting a stunned reaction from everyone. But this was the best action I could think of. Waiting here would mean nothing. We'll be slaughtered to the last the moment the enemy was upon us. Retreat! I called once again, and the soldiers finally turned tail and began running. I called and began pointing at a few soldiers, who were well halfway in stride. They stopped looking at me, and I could even feel the helplessness in their eyes. Light the camp and tents on fire. It should buy us time to escape. Do it quickly and run as fast as you can. I called and moved forward. There was no way for me to take one of the enemy's horses, as I didn't know how to ride one, and even if I did, I'm better off not riding a warhorse that had lost its master, lest I want a broken back and a rude spear through the chest when someone finds my body and laughs at how dumb I was trying to hijack a warhorse. Don't sprint! I called and everyone stopped. Keep moving, half speed. I called and the rest of the army moved at a brisk but not so fast speed. Almost like a jug. This was both to keep them warm, even if the weather in this desert had done they the burnt of that work, but they needed to keep their bodies ready for battle lest the sweat would cool them and cause them more exhaustion and unreadiness to battle. The pitch tents were thankfully packed tight, and when my soldiers lit them on fire, they caught it like a swat of dry hay under a summer sun's blaze. Smoke rose, and fire lit through the camp, securing our back from an assault for a few moments. The blaze helped scare off the horses as not even a warhorse was brave enough to charge through it, and it was hot enough for even the heavily armored soldiers to try and move through. Their only option was to wait, and we weren't going to wait for them. We moved on foot, for long arduous hours, with no enemy behind us, as the path elongated and extended forward. Thankfully this valley was wide enough to allow our army to move, but crooked and with enough obstacles to stop any of the enemy's horses to charge into a full sprint. We kept moving as my group moved at half a running pace. A man passed me his water skin, and I was thankful as I was parched beyond humanly possible. I took a sip, dousing my almost brittle throat, and passed the water skin to another person. We had no chance at survival against the enemy, but running away, we can make it if we're lucky enough. The only problem was, if there was an end to this valley or if it extended to eternity. The scout that had first alarmed us to the enemy came running again. Keep moving. We're close to the valley's end, there are friendlies in wait. Hope, good, this would raise the morals, but I didn't like how it made almost all of the soldiers run even faster. Keep your goddamned pace. I shouted. The last thing I wanted for them was to exhaust themselves before they reached the end, only for the enemy to find weak exhausted prey to pick. The friendlies that the scout had said would have been pretty helpful here holding our back, but I immediately shook the idea out of my head. The cave was tight packed enough with my soldiers, it would be suicide to add more to this death trap. As if the enemy had known of the friendlies in wait, I heard the thundering sound of hooves behind us. Though still far away, it would take them less than a dozen minutes to reach us. How can I stop the enemy from mowing us to the last? And especially since the troops were so close to the exit. Rope. I need rope. Rope. I called and 2 soldiers came to me with it. Even without being able to see their expression, I could bet that they have bewildered expressions on what I'll be doing with rope. I took the rope and attached it over a protruding rock, then ran all the way to the other side of the valley and attached it on another protrusion, making sure it was taut and strapped tight. I continued forward. This cost me a few precious seconds, but the idea was easy to understand. The rest of the retinue immediately did the same, strapping rope whenever possible on rocks and protrusions as we continued the pace. A few brave soldiers even picked up their spears and ran behind us, to secure the way for the rest at the expense of their own lives. I couldn't stand back and help them, even if a part of me wanted to, but the bigger cowardly but pragmatic part advised otherwise. These soldiers needed someone to lead them out, and if I were to fall, I don't want to think about it. The sound of horses falling echoed soon behind us. This wasn't good. It meant that the enemy had been far closer than I anticipated, and they were hot on our heels. Yet thank the mighty for smiling down upon us as the exit of the valley was, I sight. This was both a relief and at the same time a proof of the soldiers' indomitable will, as even more decided to stand and leave the wounded to run away so they could hold the enemy. The friendlies were out of the valley, but will be mowed to the last if we exit right now. The soldiers knew it and they decided to sacrifice their lives for the rest to escape. I never knew them, never spent more than these few hours with them, but felt a sense of belonging to see people laying their lives for the rest. This selfless act was enough to send shivers down my spine. I can't explain it, but it was enough to make me stand my ground. I handed the banner to one of the soldiers. Keep them running. I called and drew my sword. How stupid, how futile, laying one's life on the line for the rest to escape, but at the same time, it felt like the right thing to do. This is what the book had said, and this is what I'll abide by. It felt right. And if it feels right, then it's definitely right. No matter the odds. I'll fight. Even if old and frail. No, I'm not old, not here, not now. I'm a young man, a soldier. And even if I had no sense of attachment to these soldiers, there was a sense of belonging and camaraderie that I cannot explain, and it would be wrong to abandon people who selflessly sacrifice their lives for the rest without me doing the same. Against my pragmatic self, against every common sense of self-preservation, it felt right to stand here. With these few dozen heroes, it felt right to die here. Because otherwise, none would escape. And at that moment, I forgot that I was in a test, and immediately, the cloud over the faces of the soldiers next to me disappeared. Most of them had expressions of grim determination. None were cowards, none thought themselves heroes for doing what they're doing. They all knew that their friends and comrades relied on them to survive, and they'll be damn sure to make that happen. Though I wasn't here for a long time, it only felt right to say this. It's been an honor serving with you. There and then, the enemy cavalry was upon us. The riders charged at us with ferocious impunity. If not for one final linked rope to cause a few to stumble, I would have died right there and then, trampled by a warhorse. The horse that fell in front of me delivered its rider to my feet, concussed obviously but still looked whole. I dove my sword right at the small opening between his helmet and chest armor. I didn't need to do more. The strike slit a major artery and he would die within minutes, nor could I afford to make a cleaner hit as more rider came at me. Our forces, not more than a couple of dozens that decided to stand and allow the rest to escape, were nothing more than grass in the way of a stampeding rhino. Only the rhino needs to slow down due to the narrowness of the valley, the rope stumbling the horses and the fallen animals blocking its way. If we were on open fields, we would have been mowed down to the last in less than a couple of seconds. But thanks to the buckle of the enemy, we managed to stop the rest by using their own numbers against them. At best, 20 of our soldiers remained to fend off hundreds. A wide mace threatened to cave my skull in, but thanks to my mind's eye, I was able to predict the mace's trajectory. Though I was unable to use any cultivation, my mind still worked like that of a cultivator, giving me ample time to duck under the mace then deliver a rising slash at the rider, slicing through the opening under his armpit. The sword connected and the rider's arm was barely attached to its socket thanks to a bloodied tendon. Another spear threatened to impale me where I stood, to which I dodged by the barest of margins. The spear's tip sliced through my leather pauldron causing mild discomfort while the shaft rubbed against my shoulder netting it a hollow empty strike against the air. I pulled lightly at the already extended spear causing the rider who refused to abandon his weapon to fall from his horse. I sliced at the rider's back neck, as fast as I could as I noticed another spear coming my way. My sword slid fast enough, ripping the man's neck, gushing blood, and moved in a rising slash to parry the spear, where one of my comrades struck at the spear wielder with his own spear toppling him from over his horse. I knew that I had no martial skills to speak of, and most of the stuff I had just done was thanks to the power behind the soldier I was currently possessing, and the increased thinking process of the mind's eye. But mental exhaustion will soon down upon me, that is of course if this soldier's body I'm using doesn't outright collapse from physical exertion. The battle continued for what felt like hours as we fought on the back end. More of our comrades fell to errant sword strikes or crushed under the maces of the enemy, further dooming this already hopeless situation, but I had to fight, and I kept on fighting, even when one spear cut through my thigh, not because I couldn't dodge in time, but because the body I'm using refused to dodge. It was already exhausted beyond humanly possible. Another soldier sliced at my left arm, rendering it barely usable. But I still fought, and fought, using every scrap of energy I could muster, every bit and every speck of power that was left in this body. My comrades had long since died and only I was left fighting, and that had been a long time ago, or perhaps I felt like it was. Bloodied, battered, and exhausted. I still heaved for more breath as I sliced at the enemy. Until a time I noticed everyone standing still, none moved towards me. For they knew that with injury such as the ones I have right now, it would only be a matter of time before I fell down. The enemy soldiers knew that if they were to attack, they'll only die. And not attacking is what they did. Standing still watching this strange man, fighting to the literal last breath. And then one of them slapped a fist to his chest, as did others, and soon I understood why. They were saluting an enemy, one worthy of respect for standing against odds, fighting to the brinks of death, yet still grasping straws of futile hope. They didn't see an enemy, they saw a soldier fighting for a cause, and that would bring even the mightiest of foes to respect such act. There and then, my eyes darkened, and I fell on my knees, breathing the agonizing last breaths of this body. Suddenly, I woke up, where I found myself seated within the laughing slaughterer's pagoda. In front of me was the small table with the teacup emptied out. The laughing slaughterer's sound resounded through the hall. Pitiful display. Such as yours, for you only slew 43 of your enemies. Many had achieved higher than you have. You're better off giving up, for the tests will only become harder. The voice was monotonous as always. But then another vocal message sounded. However, unlike any before, your battle had secured the survival of more than 319 soldiers. You are the first to have managed to help soldiers escaping the pursuit of the Crown regime. Most would fight against the enemy, scoring as many kills as they can, while the enemy would run rampant among their lines only for them to die once outnumbered. You secured a path to retreat for the others before you returned to battle. And my verdict is. The voice trailed. This time the message felt a bit more lifelike, but still it had a neutral dead tone to it. But the following words were like heaven and earth. Stupid, the words sounded like a thunder's echo within me. For no cultivator would weigh their own self-preservation against the survival of people they do not know. Foolish. For you gave your life for ones you didn't have any relation to. The most stupid of all, your pride blinded you to the simple truth: survive. Survive at all costs. I couldn't debunk the statement, because I knew in a sense he was right. I didn't know any of them, and I should have escaped when it was possible. I do know that I stopped and fought alongside the soldiers so others would survive. But why did I do that? Did I know them? They weren't friends, family, or anything else, they were just soldiers. Still, it felt wrong to leave them to their demise. My conviction, I muttered, though I didn't think the voice would answer back. I fought because I believed it was right. A loud silence echoed around. It was so baffling that I could only hear the sound of my own heartbeats and the breaths I drew. It was a still deathly silence that I never felt before. Then the laughing slaughterer's voice echoed once again. So young, and you have the rudimentary understanding of the truth, your Tao, perhaps not, perhaps egoistic beliefs, still. Idiotic, but I won't sway you against your conviction, for it is not my place. Proceed, the words echoed, and another spiraling staircase came down. This time the reward was different. It was a manual, a sword art. The Sanguine Blade, first tome. I took the book in hand and began flipping its pages. It was a series of sword arts dedicated to slashes and stabs, with overexerted and overextended strikes. The risks entailing these sword arts were dangerous, for every attack was overbearing, but at the same time, held great risks. For every attack would cause the enemy to falter, hesitate briefly. As did the manual explain, this art required a resolution far beyond what any man could ever hope to obtain. It was the epitome of a high-risk, high-reward. A sword art that relied on diving without regard to the enemy's blows or one's self-preservation. It was meant as a risky sword fight that made every attack be seen as a trade of life. Just the major idea behind this book would make one shake in fright. Who would ever learn something as dangerous as this? But then, I remembered what happened in the dream I just had. This book is a reward for the same actions I did, lack of self-preservation. This sword art is a reward for the actions I have shown. Though without any other sword art at my disposal, I believe this sword art would be good in my hands. I tucked the book inside my robes where the book on my chest sucked in the manual, and I moved forward. Once I was on the third floor, I saw Shi-sun, who looked exhausted beyond exhaustion and had several wounds all over his body. He was the first thing I noticed before I took a second look at where I was. This floor was also slightly smaller than the one before it, but not much. The only difference was, this floor was separated into two sections. One, where I and Shi-sun stood. It was the same as before, a wooden floor with no decoration in sight and no doors or windows, while the other side of the room had vast treasure troves, weapons, spiritual stones, manuals, and even crafting materials. Yet there was a mirror-like barrier that stood tall, separating the two sections. And on the corner, there was the spiraling stair leading upwards. Greed is the bane of all men, but in front of so much wealth, would you ignore it? Or risk all to obtain it? The question the laughing slaughterer was the last of his words as I stood looking at the treasures in front of me. Indeed, they were mighty appealing, as I noticed many spiritual herbs that I didn't even recognize, or the space stones on the floor that looked like the least important bits and pieces of this treasure. These space stones are things I need to continue cultivating my star technique to hide my poison cultivation. But I can't get past the barrier, this I know of, but Shi-sun apparently doesn't, seeing from the look on his eyes. He looked at me like I was a heaven-sent gift. Shen Bao. You made it here, he said. Yeah, I'm also surprised to see you here. I mused. How did you manage your way here? It took me a lot of effort to fight my way through the hordes of spiritual beasts lying about. I doubt you have the ability to fight them. But now. Apprehension was apparent on Shi-sun's face, especially now that he is weakened, and thinks I was able to fight my way through numerous enemies. I pulled out the healing pill I got on the first floor and threw him the vial. He inspected it using his divine sense, which constantly passed through me once again as he tried to see if I had anything on me. But right now, as long as I appear calm and collected, and not answer how I managed to defeat hordes of spiritual beasts, even though I have no idea what he is talking about. Perhaps we took different routes to get here, and his was ridiculously dangerous. I should be able to instill a sense of mystery and with it, danger. Good, the less he knows, the more apprehensive he will be, and with the disregard to the value of the pill I just gave him, which by the way would definitely fetch a fortune outside, he will think I have no interest in it, making me stand on a higher mental pedestal than I deserve. Games within games, mind games to put one above the other, without any verbal word spoken. As long as I carefully set myself above him, I will give him one more reason not to test me, or outright turn hostile. I could have easily ignored his exhausted and wounded self, but a wounded lion is more prone to be aggressive than a healthy one. Especially since he will subconsciously feel that even if he was as hale and healthy as he is right now, he proved to be of no consequence or danger to me. Thank you, fellow cultivator Shen Bao. Shi-sun said and chucked down the pill. He sat down in the lotus position and began digesting the pill. Fellow cultivator, he said, and that's a sure sign that I gained his respect or his apprehensive fear. Which was better? No need, I said as I got closer to the barrier, giving him an easy target as I turned my back to him. I looked at the barrier and smiled, then turned around and said, let's go, there is no need to waste time here. Why? I tried hard to break through this barrier, and I think it could crumble with a bit more effort. Shi-sun said. I shook my head saying, this barrier is designed specifically to do that. It will wane and look about to break just enough for you to exhaust all your power, then when you replenish, you'll try again and will seem about to break just as you're exhausted once again. It will do so until you're fully depleted, desperate and without any speck of power or items to replenish yourself. This is a test of your greed, and if you continue down that line, you'll fail. Shi-sun took a moment to digest my words. They said, how do you know all of that? Simply put, this barrier is made using quasi-saint chi. No matter how strong you are, you'll never match this barrier in strength unless you're an ascendant. Even I can't decipher all of its mysteries, but I know that this thing will survive the bombardment of millions of nascent cultivators without a crack. I said in a decisive and certain tone. Shi-sun sighed and stood up. Damnable trick, it almost cost me my cultivation as I tried to break through it using a forbidden technique. Damn. Shi-sun cursed and I felt that he was pissed enough that he was going to once again take it off on the barrier. Also, I added, your efforts would have been for naught, I said. Shi-sun looked at me questioningly. Yeah, because those treasures are fake, I said. Nonsense, I could feel their spiritual release even through the barrier. Shi-sun shook his head. That's the thing, this barrier is actually replicating the spiritual residue of all of the items behind it. These are nothing but fakes, but that doesn't mean that they're not here. Looking completely lost, I interjected, these treasures probably exist on another floor and they are only projected here to exhaust the cultivators in futile attempts to lessen their chances at retrieving the real treasures. Simple method, but undoubtedly effective. I said as I gave a knowing gaze at the now slightly ashamed Shi-sun. Right, Shi-sun said after clearing his throat, let's keep moving then. And we took off to the upper floor. We arrived at a new floor, yet again a bit smaller than the one under it. But on this floor, there didn't seem to be anything of note besides the massive pillar in the middle of it. It was a square pillar made of an obsidian-like substance. Before I could consult the poison god's book, Shi-sun hurried towards the stone, trying to pocket it into his pouch but was soundly denied. Damn, I can't take it, nor can I refine it for my own use. Shi-sun said. Pardon my lack of knowledge, what is this? I asked. I thought you would know, this is a law stone. Though this is the largest one I had ever seen. It helps cultivators understand the laws of the world. But on a rudimentary level. This is more like a preparation for when they begin studying law in order to confirm their Tao and create their domain. So many new concepts that I have yet to fully understand, but I believe I have the gist of it. Though fellow cultivator Shen Bao's cultivation is severely lacking, you can still gain glimpses of this law stone if you can understand something from it. And I believe this is the test of this flower. But it is highly unfavorable for you due to your cultivation level. Shi-sun said, though he spoke in a non-derisive manner, I could feel hints of pity in his tone. Not the good kind of pity, even though pity was never good. I nodded at Shi-sun and approached the stone, trying to understand what secrets it held. There was nothing worth paying attention to, it was nothing more than a well-chiseled stone that stood in the middle of the room, but seeing Shi-sun sit in a lotus position in front of it and enter meditation gave me enough hints on what I should do next. I sat opposed to Shisun on the other side of the stone and closed my eyes. The stone was not meant to be seen through one's eyes, but one's mind, and using my mind's eye, I was able to peer through the stone into a vast expanse. No, into the vast expanse as the Poison God's book just sent the information to my head. This world you live in is but a minuscule speck of dust in the ever-expanding vast expanse. It is unlimited and forever enlarging, birthing new life every fraction of a second, and creating secrets, treasures, and worlds anew while bringing death, destruction, and annihilation to more. You are but a mere speck of dust within a speck of dust in such a large world, but even a pebble can create ripples that resound through a lake as you can make your name resound through the vast expanse. While the domain mankind had explored cannot be more than a fraction of the vast expanse, you can be sure that more exist for you to explore, and the dangers and rewards it entails are for only the brave to discover. Do not feel as someone insignificant, for as long as you follow this master's teachings, your voice will be heard loud and clear throughout the vast expanse. I took the words of the Poison God's book with a grain of salt, as a former men from Earth know, the universe is huge, and huge isn't enough to encompass the true meaning of how big the universe is. Simply put, I know that as many grains of sand there are on Earth, there are more stars in the universe. And that is true. I peered into the vast expanse that was in this stone, and all I could see were stars so numerous that it was mind-boggling to keep track of them all. And then there was a star, a green one, in incessant turmoil, as green flames spun and rotated, revolved, and morphed within each other, and then my eyes focused on the planet even further, ignoring the background and solely peering into the planet. It felt warm, not hot, not boiling, but just warm. The flames weren't flames, but rather liquid that acted like flames. And within this liquid lived monsters of proportions unimaginable. Serpents that were as long and as large as rivers, and scorpions that furrowed into the flame liquid and emerged, battling against each other in frenzied fury, never stopping, never receding, and always and forever battling against each other. I saw more creatures, but there was only one thing in relation to all of these things. The massive leaping frogs, or the snakes, nor the colorful bugs, they were all poisonous. This was a planet that was festering with poisonous creatures, and the planet itself was doused in poison. I have no idea what this means. How can a planet have an ecosystem such as this? But I was in a cultivation world and making logical explanations where I was literally spewing poison out of my own mouth just a few moments ago seemed rather illogical and a moot point to argue. Suddenly, something strange seemed to happen, as the waves of green flames parted, revealing two sets of eyes that definitely belonged to a reptilian creature. The eyes, from where I could see them, sent shivers down my spine, as they were as large as the moon, and glistened in gold while the abysmal slit in them looked like space was split. This creature's eyes were so massive that I had a hard time understanding how it could even fit inside this planet. Then I figured out why almost soon afterward, when the damn planet shuddered and literally uncoiled around itself. A draconic serpent as large as a planet was looking directly at me, where the former liquid that made the planet slowly rotated around its body, probably just due to how massive this creature was. It literally had its own gravitational field. Where the massive creatures I saw before, now were nothing more than specks of dust along the enormous size of the draconic serpent's frame. The serpent opened its mouth, revealing rows of fangs large enough to contend with mountains, and then it hissed, with enough force that space around it shuddered and vibrated, causing it to ripple and break in so many ways that I felt the destruction of the whole universe was bound to happen at any time now. Then, with its eyes locked at me, the serpent began moving towards me. Only then was I forced back into where I was sitting. Fear gripped at my heart, and cold sweat drenched my back. Shisun was still meditating, not having sensed what just happened, and only the Poison God's book was my solace as it explained what happened and what I just realized would be my most troublesome foe, and the looming scythe of death upon my head. Serpent God, one of the 7 primordial creatures. Nothing much is known about them, but I have faced it several times before and never managed against its impressive might. Not even at my prime, I was not even able to scratch it. Thankfully, it was not fast, but at the same time, it was my most fearsome foe. For this primordial creature, it vied, loathed, and envied anyone using his path of cultivation. It will not still, nor stop until all that seek the Tao of poison are consumed by it. As this primordial creature's goal was to go beyond his current unknown cultivation and reach above, it failed to find treasures enabling it to break through, and would seek to break through by finding and consuming cultivators who use the poison path. However, what bogged my mind was the fact that although there were many sects cultivating poison, the serpent god would only move against specific targets, and I was among them, and so would this danger befall upon you as you cultivate the same path as I did. Disciple of mine, take not this creature as a sign of despair and mortality, but embrace it as a deadly reminder that you have to increase your cultivation before the serpent god reaches where you are. Do not curse me for forcing you down this path only to be hunted to the end of life by this creature, for I too had suffered at his hands, and had known of its impeding approach only when I achieved ascension. Then and there, I was lucky to have an artifact that propelled me on a random planet through the vast expanse, giving me ample opportunity to escape the hunt. I grew stronger while the serpent approached, and whenever it got closer, I would escape once again. I have never found a way to escape its hunt, and as you read this, do know that if the serpent is after you, then it had already claimed me within its jaws. Escape, run, and grow stronger, for only when you're mightier than the serpent god, can you free yourself from your own mortality. I took deep and heavy breaths before images began flooding my mind, as I saw the serpent god chasing after the figure of a young man that didn't look older than his 30s. The man flew through the stars with enough speed that the stars turned to long rays of light. But the serpent god leisurely followed after it, breaking through planets as if they were made of paper, and gobbling them up along his way. The cultivator stopped, heaved raising both hands, then swiped down, with his fingers in a clawing manner. This clawed grip looked exactly like the poison tiger's claw. And while I could replicate the basic move to some semblance of perfectness, what I saw made my head throb in exasperation. As when compared to my claw, the cultivator, who I now assumed to be the poison god, created claws waves that were larger than planets, like seriously larger than fucking planets, where he himself looked no bigger than an atom compared to the massive space fissures he created. The claw marks wounded space itself, forcing it to break on contact, where waves of pale green and sordid energy came down upon the snake. And what was vexing was how easily the serpent shrugged off the titanic assault with relative ease, causing the cultivator to sigh in hopelessness and turn tail, escaping further. The images stopped and I was left with a sense of desolated dread. How the hell can I face against something like that? And that creature was creeping towards me as I speak. How long will it take to get here? Hours? Days? Years or centuries? No matter how long, it is of the utmost frustration to know that death is coming whether you want it or not. I focused my eyes on the stone because I needed to at least figure out how far we are. And just as I found myself in the vast expanse, I focused on my body, finding it on a random star in a random direction in the vast expanse. And almost instinctively, I turned to locate the serpent, who was still coming over, but he was so far, so far away that it would be absurd to even believe this distance crossable in 100 lifetimes. I had more chances of dying by a heart attack or outright getting killed by Shi-sun here than the serpent to kill me. The distance was absurdly far that I had a hard time understanding why did the poison god even feared this thing. He could just keep randomly teleporting around the universe. Still, it was frustrating knowing that this damn thing would always and forever be hot on my heels. I calmed myself and began inspecting the rest of this unfathomably large space, but at the same time making sure not to disturb any ancient beings, and then I found myself lost in the beauty of this world. For it was so grand, so large, and so majestic that one would spend several lifetimes trying to describe it and never give it its due right. Space was grand and kept so many secrets and treasures and mysteries that it was extremely compelling to go and seek them, and so I found myself lost in its amazing mysteries. As I swam in the embrace of the universe, I came to a slight understanding of what space was. Emptiness, yet fluffiness. The universe was empty, but at the same time, it literally had everything in it, a conflicting duality. Unlike life and death, this was the existence and non-existence at the same time. For even if the majority of the universe was empty space, there literally was everything in it. Food for thoughts, I believed, and I saw through the universe, discovering more of what lay in its embrace. I could see worlds being born, and others destroyed. Space shifted, in the literal sense, as it grew and shrank like the chest of a person, taking in a breath. The universe, though calm, silent, and forever grim and dark, had life in its darkness, and this life was amazing to behold. Suddenly, my head started hurting and I was forced out of my meditative state. A loud booming voice echoed within the pagoda. You have not fared greatly in understanding law, but you have been given chance to improve in the future. Take your newfound knowledge and use it when you encounter true application of law. The words of the laughing slaughterer were spoken to us as Shi-sun sighed and looked at me. Sadly, I couldn't understand the mysteries of the world, but fret not, for you have a low cultivation base and it was not expected of you anyway. Let's move to the upper floor, Shi-sun said. And as he spoke, the upper room opened up, where the two of us received a small square stone, similar to the stone in the room. It was a law stone, definitely smaller and weaker, but it had law in it, and I would study it later when I have the time. Shi-sun climbed up the stairs first, and just as I was about to follow him, I heard the laughing slaughtherer's voice. Unlike before when it was booming through the room, this time, it was sent directly into my head. Child, you searched through the universe, unguided by any thought, and in it, you saw the birth of new worlds and the destruction of others. Your cultivation level is so far below your understanding that once you attain greater heights, you'll understand how gifted you truly are for such insights you currently have. Keep your sights focused, and do know that martial might is great at killing foes, but a complete comprehensive domain can be the death of gods if one was fully capable of controlling and understanding the laws that created their domain. Might is right, but wit binds might to its beddings. The words the laughing slaughterer had spoken were like teachings a master would say to their disciple, though they didn't have a lot of information in them. I wholly understood what he meant, not by his words, but the underlying meaning. The laughing slaughterer had given me advice, precious advice, and at the same time, he didn't outright say what I should do, lest he affects my path in the pursuit of the martial road. He showed me the way but didn't guide me through it, giving me the choice to do so on my own. Might is right, and that is the law of the cultivation worlds. Only the strong are heard, but those with the ability to understand law are able to bind the world's laws to their own, and in a world where laws are bound, what can might do? It can also be bent according to the laws superseding the world. The laughing slaughterer's words were not many, but behind them lay thousands upon thousands of years' worth of wisdom, and I was amazed not by the wisdom behind the slaughtherer's words, nor how did I even manage to understand so much from his words, but what amazed me the most is how he used so few words to convey so many meanings. A great mind, and a dangerous one to boots. I turned and gave a nod to the empty air. It was a gesture that I just felt would be right, thanks to a man that didn't exist here right now, but well deserving of it. There were few that would give advice freely. Even if the laughing slaughterer was not here, he was due his thanks, as it was his right. I walked upstairs, to the 5th floor, only to find Shi-sun standing still, not moving a single muscle forward in utter and complete shock. Cultivators, as this trial continues, you must know that there are always higher mountains and deeper seas, and here lays the example. The laughing slaughterer's words came as I saw what was in front of me and I went giddy with excitement, the complete opposite of Shi-sun who looked like he was about to pass out from fright. And he was right to do so, as in front of us were a dozen terracotta-like puppets. They were almost exactly like X, but with some subtle differences. The material making them, though I didn't know what it was, it looked sturdier than the one X was made of. They had full armor to top it off, and they wielded weapons that radiated spiritual energy like the floodgates. Fight your way through, if you wish to continue ascending, otherwise leave with your tail behind your backs. The laughing slaughterer said as a door opened to the right of us. I wish to surrender the purest, Shi-sun said without hesitation and began walking toward the door. He looked back at my standing form and frowned. Shen Bao, these are all soul formation level puppets. I could barely handle one, but a dozen. I don't even dream of surviving for a half incense time. Don't do anything rash. Shi-sun said. Right, I said, and he was right. There was no way for me to win this battle, but damn if I was not tempted to dismantle these puppets and know the difference between X and these puppets if they were compared to soul formation level cultivators, which was higher than Shi-sun. Then what gave them such strength? I needed to know, and that greed of knowledge caused me to hesitate into leaving. Just as I turned away from the puppets to leave, the laughing slaughtherer's voice sounded once again. Only one may leave, and almost immediately after his words were spoken, Shi-sun bolted out of the door with the speed of light, giving me not a single moment to react. The door closed behind Shi-sun and I was trapped amongst 12 unmoving puppets. I was fucked, and there was no way for me to survive this ordeal. But so far the puppets didn't move. Didn't attack and were waiting. I could even feel their gaze through their lifeless eyes. As they stared at me. The Poison God's book didn't alert me to any danger, however, and I was left stuck here. I had more chances for hell to freeze over than to survive a single attack from any of these soldiers, not to mention how uselessly incompatible my skill set was against these things. Though X is strong, I don't fully know if he could fight his way through these things. So I was left with one thing to do: run. And I did, as I jumped back to the lower floor, only to have one of the soldiers jump after me. Desperate and hopeless my situation would seem, but I grinned from ear to ear, as the situation gave me a great chance that I never thought I'll be able to do. The soldier will definitely catch up to me in less than a breath's time, but I already called X out, and he shot out from the Poison God's book like a bullet to intercept the puppet soldier behind me. I already gave X a mental command: use all the power you can and stop or kill the enemy if possible. And thankfully only one soldier came after me. And the most surprising was, X was more than capable of contending against a soul formation puppet. Something I'll need to pay attention to later as I kept moving away towards the lower floors. I needed to get to the greed floor. Loud explosions of wood and metal against metal echoed behind me. I wasn't even entitled to see the battle between the puppets as they clashed enough times in a single second that I could only hear one constant boom of the sound of metals clashing against each other. Once I arrived at the barrier which hid the illusory treasures, I slapped my right hand against the barrier to which it shuddered. Then I pulled a brush from my side pouch and began drawing inscriptions on the barrier. My goal: simple: overwrite, overwhelm and overtax the barrier. It would have been foolish to attempt this with Shi-sun behind me, but now that he is gone all the treasures are mine. Yes, all the treasures, as what I said to Shi-sun before was nothing but a lie he would have immediately tore apart if he was not frustrated and exhausted from his attempts at breaking the barrier. Because even if the barrier could replicate the aura of weapons from another floor to this one, I would have been able to see such an inscription, but there were none and I lied at Shi-sun to prove intellectual superiority against his sight. I kept overwriting inscriptions as fast as I could, but the barrier kept trying to defend itself, futile, as this was not an attacking restriction, but rather a defensive one and lacked lethal force. It could do nothing as I kept writing commands on top of it, small commands that would be futile and destroyed by the barrier in no time, but the sheer amount of the small commands I wrote was enough to keep the barrier focused on removing my inscription to keep its integrity. While I wrote the commands and the barrier kept removing them, I added something else. It was a simple random stroke at first. Then another, while I kept writing more inscriptions. The barrier didn't deem those strokes worthy of its attention as it kept its focus on the more annoying overtaxing inscriptions I kept adding. This was the same thing I did to Elder Yun when I played my first game of Go against him using my mind's eye, divide and conquer. And I was dividing the inscription's focus as I drew those random but subtle random brush strokes. But I was pressed for time, exhaustion was of no concern to me, as better be exhausted than dead. As I heard the sounds of the clash getting closer, no doubt X was being overwhelmed. Damn it, I don't want to lose X, he was the first puppet I ever made, he was mine. And I didn't want to lose him, but I had no choice in the matter. God damn it, I was distracted for a second and the barrier was about to retake control of our little game. But I focused harder, enough that I began seeing red, as more blood vessels popped in my eyes from the sheer speed that my eyes were moving from place to place. A small pain, for greater gains, it kept me focused on an all-time high as my hand increased in speed, enough that if one were to look at my hands they'd see my hands blurring as they wrote more and more inscriptions piled on top of each other. And when I was about to strike the last brush, I heard the loud thud of metal against stone. Turning I saw a haggard, soldier puppet, with various wounds, and poisoned needles stabbing through its form. Even a couple of X's fingers were embedded into its eyes, but the soldier was wholly fine and was standing with his sword drawn. Fear gripped my heart, and sadness, for this means that X had lost, and this puppet was now going to kill me before I finished what I was going to do. Only to have hope reignited as the soldier dropped on its face when X showed up behind him. His head was torn in half, and his right arm dangled uselessly against his side, where thousands of cuts littered his body. X still stood, while a soul formation puppet was laying on the ground. And this was all thanks to the fact that I had X working with 5 brains instead of 1, as even though the gaping hole in his chest that destroyed his spiritual stone, or the destroyed right arm, X still had 3 other brains, 1 in his left shoulder and 2 more on his legs that acted as secondary brains and kept the puppet from failing his duty in answering my command. X's multi-brain functionality enabled him to fight tooth and nail to the bitter end. As for even if he lost his head, hands, or chest, there will always be a command center guiding him and he would still fight, where the soul formation puppet only had a single inscription on his chest which X had destroyed by giving up one of his hands. X moved towards me, with difficult yet confirmed steps. He struggled to move due to all of the damage he had received, but he was a source of pride and joy to me, as he managed to defeat something that made a nascent soul cultivator scurry away in fright. X was mine. And I'll be damned not to reward him for his efforts. I struck the last brush against the barrier, and then a formation that wouldn't have been possible to create was now in place. All those strokes I made on the barrier had made a formation on top of this formation. A restriction that overwrites the former restriction and gave me the ability to take command of the barrier in front of me. X, bring the soldier over, I called and my puppet heeded my command. Though painful to see, how awkward X moved, and how he couldn't even relay the damage he suffered. It pained me to see X suffering but without pain, and it only confirmed my resolve to give him the best. X dragged the puppet soldier over and I waved my hand, causing a hole in the barrier to open up. The moment the hole in the barrier appeared, I was assaulted with powerful waves of spiritual chi that were trapped inside the barrier. X threw the puppet on the other side of the barrier and got inside while I followed suit and closed the barrier from within. I now have control of this barrier and everything that was behind it. All those treasures, spirit stones, weapons, and artifacts were now mine. And best of all, they had a lot of materials that I could use to repair X and make him better, stronger, and faster. Just as I was admiring the treasure trove, the puppets from the upper floors came down. They had probably sensed the death of their comrades and came after me. They should have done that first, but I suppose they didn't think I'm worth their efforts, and thus. There's the rub. I went on my knees and removed the armors that the puppet soldier wore. I needed to confirm something and almost immediately I sighed in thanks. The puppet didn't seem to have a self-destruction inscription or anything that could cause it to stand back up. I began by removing its parts and saw through the inscriptions, making it, figuring out why this thing was a formation-level puppet. The soldier puppet also had a single formation on its chest, but it was so exhaustive and had so many inscriptions in it that I made my head hurt trying to figure it all out. But what pulled my attention was the fact that it also had 5 high-grade spirit stones operating it. Could it be that a puppet only needed more spirit stones for it to gain a higher cultivation grade? But if so, anyone could make soul formation-level puppets. Oh no, it's the knowledge behind the setup of the inscriptions, as even if one was able to procure the spirit stones, they'll need a lot of understanding of inscriptions to write a proper formation able to channel all the spirit stones without clashing against each other, something I came to understand only now, but at the same time had known before. This was simply because of my understanding of programming. Though I'm not the best in the field, I needed code and computer knowledge in my field of work. Also, the education quality back on Earth was so far higher than inscriptions were nothing more than codes for me instead of what many of the books called language of the heaven. For me, they were nothing more than mere commands to do a specific job. I didn't need to understand how they worked or who provided the pamphlet for them to work as they are. I only knew they worked and I used them to the best of my ability and accidentally created a soul formation level puppet. Now there was another factor on how to create formation-level puppets besides how to organize the inscriptions not to clash with each other or the spiritual stones and how to organize their wavelengths. Stuff like I said before I subconsciously understood thanks to my education, and this was the material. Powerful material was needed to operate powerful puppets, as showed by X. He had so much power but the material making him was not strong enough to wield all of that power. Not that X was weak, no, he could tear a nascent soul cultivator apart like he was tearing paper. But for him to show all of his might he'll need a stronger body, and it's already in front of me. And thus, I began dismantling the soldier puppet in front of his peers who looked at me with dead eyes. Once I dismantled the puppet fully and removed the spirit stones, I began by deleting the inscription it had, but before I could rewrite them, I was stuck in a dilemma. X. How can I transfer him here? I didn't want to lose X, nor make a stronger puppet and discard my first puppet. No, I wanted to wholly transfer X's being into this new body. But how can I do that? How can I harness the soul of a soulless puppet? I looked at X and then back at the dismantled puppet in front of me. Then it struck me: overwrite, overwhelm and overtake. X, come here, I commanded and X came to me. I opened his chest and wrote a new set of commands into them. Smiling with wicked glee, I continued writing until my hands felt tired but kept going, adding more commands over all of X's body. Then when I stood up, I felt like I was going to pass out from mental exhaustion. I pulled a few leaves from the spiritual tea Master Yun had given me and munched on them. I didn't have the tools nor did it look alright brewing tea in front of so many hostile puppets looking at me, and I had to make with the small semblance of mental relief that the leaves gave me. But what happened next caused me great joy, as I have just inputted a hijack command on X. To which he used to great success, as he dove his still functioning arm on the puppet and the inscription on his hand flooded down the soldier puppet's arm. The inscriptions moved like they had a purpose, and I found it amazing how mystifying this was, as solid writings turned to live words. How can one explain this? I have no idea, and like always I do not fret over things I don't fully understand nor have the ability to currently understand. X finished with transferring his consciousness, or at least one of his consciousness, into the puppet. The one in his hand. The puppet's hand didn't move however, as it needed the spiritual stone, and just as I was about to act, X shone bright, where the runes on his chest moved to his arm, the one that had all its inscriptions melted into the soldier puppet, and these new inscriptions were now commanding his hand instead of his chest. And his hand moved once again as it plucked one of the spirit stones on his body and placed it on the soldier puppet, then he continued, transferring his conscious onto the new puppet. This was amazing to see. This was intelligence. God damn it, did I make an artificial intelligence? The thought disappeared the moment it came to mind. No, this was probably a reaction to the self-preservation command I created into X. He made sure to survive and transferred his consciousness to a better host. Parasitic, but it suited my purpose. Soon after X had fully transferred itself into the new puppet soldier, I began by adjusting the new X, editing a few runes and correcting ones, then finished off by repairing some of the damage on the soldier puppet. Looking away from the soldier puppet on the ground, X's older puppet body was left on the ground, lifeless. And I didn't want to lose it. I placed it inside the Poison God's book, and now I was left with a good feeling. I was nothing more than a first-tier Foundation establishment cultivator. But I had a soul formation puppet to guard me. And this felt damn good. But when I remembered the gigantic planet-eating serpent that was inevitably coming my way, my sense of security dulled. But this only ignited my ambition. I'll become stronger, even if I had to rely on X to secure my safety right now. I'll become powerful in the future that I'll no longer need protection. I looked at the puppets outside the barrier and sighed, because before I become stronger, I'll need to actually defeat these puppets and leave. The barrier was protecting me, but at the same time, imprisoning me inside it. Damn it. X is strong, and now he is stronger, but sending him out is the same as dooming him to his death, and I need a way out, and I only have my little brain to use and find myself an escape. Thinking things through, I found myself in more of a bind than I thought could be possible. X's presence was comforting, but with so many soul formation level puppets standing right outside the barrier, I felt like a mouse being watched by a pack of hungry cats. Not the best feeling in the world. Still, I gotta admit, there was a sense of security inside this barrier. And where Shi-sun tried to force his way through this barrier with might, these puppets didn't even bother. Why? Because they knew they couldn't. I only managed to break the barrier because I cheated. I created several codes to force the defensive measures to guard against my assault, while working on another inscription behind the barrier's back. This caused the whole thing to become mine, even if I felt that this was only temporary, because the barrier never stopped shining, as it sent commands all over its surface. And then and there I knew that this was not a good sign. For if the barrier was able to overwrite the commands I wrote on it, then it will no longer be mine to control, and if that happened, perhaps the barrier will allow the hungry cats to enter and I'll be no better than minced meat. I shook the thought out of my head. Thinking about how grim my end would be will not change the fact that I'm pressed for time. X is good and running. He is already flexing his metaphorical muscles, trying out his new body, though there is still a lot of damage on it, damage that I'll only be able to fully repair when I'm out of this damned pagoda and back in my manor. But for now, I'll make do with what I have. Getting out of here is a priority, and now I have a good idea of how to do this. I grinned as the thought took root in my mind and didn't want to leave, and this idea was a damn good one. I stood up after having finally relieved some of my mental exhaustion. The next undertaking will definitely take a good measure out of my mental health, but it's the only thing I believe that will work. I pulled my brush and dosed it in what was left of my drowsy inkberry ink. Then started splashing inscriptions on the barrier, adding more complex inscriptions atop simple ones, to do one single thing. I wasn't so arrogant to think I could make this formation into a killing formation and having it kill the puppets for me. That wouldn't work, not with my meager chi skills, but all I needed to do was add a slight modification to the barrier, something that will not clash against its basic command of protection. If I were to add an offensive trait to a defensive formation, I'll need a great deal of chi to supply the barrier, but if I were to slightly modify the terrain the barrier was protecting, then the barrier should theoretically not fight back. While it would have denied anyone else the ability to temper with it, I already held my claim over the barrier, and giving it a subtle push to do what it was already doing, protecting, shouldn't contradict its reason of existence, which is to protect and preserve. And so, I finished the inscriptions and the barrier shook, as it began morphing, from a single sheet splitting the whole room in two, into a dome, that didn't protect me anymore but encompassed the puppets. I just pulled a switcheroo on the puppets. Now instead of me being protected by the barrier, they were trapped inside it and I was free to move about. I grinned as my action worked, and to the dumb puppets, they didn't even move, because they were definitely believing that this barrier was created by their master and they had no intention of destroying it, even if it meant that it will allow them to rip me to pieces. The dome around them would hold them off indefinitely, or until one of them wisen up and stat going downtown on it. I skipped my way around the dome and toward the stairs, while the puppets tracked me with their eyes, unable to chase after me. I continued going upwards until I reached the same floor where the puppets were. "Splendid, you managed to survive." The laughing Slaughter's voice sounded through the room. And another staircase came down. Another manual appeared in front of me, and I was taken aback when I read the title. Sanguine Blade, Second Tome. This was the second tome of the Sanguine Blade arts. Good, this would mean that if I were to study this art I'll be able to have easier access to a higher tier of the manual. But would this contradict my poison cultivation? I'll have to think things through, for if I were to chase after two different paths, I'll be like the fox who chases two rabbits only to go home hungry. I climbed up the stairs and instead of finding another room, what I found was a set of stairs that led upwards to the skies. Yes, literal sky. There was no ceiling and no end to these stairs in sight, they just rose up indefinitely. As you tread the path of cultivation, do know that your soul is part of your power, for it can be a fuel to your power as it could also save you from certain death. You may use it to force your enemies to submit, and you may even escape using it once your head is no longer attached to your body, and thus possess another body to reforge yours anew. The soul is a powerful weapon and these stairs will help you temper it. Climb until you can climb no more, and that's where you'll be able to challenge your limits and elevate your soul. Trials and tribulations are the only things that a cultivator can use to become stronger. The laughing Slaughterer's voice sounded through the room, and for the first time, it wasn't as oppressive. I took the first step on the staircase, waiting for a sudden pressure to come down against me, only to be surprised that there was no such thing. I continued with another step, and more, and even more. As I climbed the stairs with ease, there was no pressure until I reached the first 300 steps, then there was pressure, only this was more like the pressure a helmet would cause upon one's head. Negligible. I continued walking up, and up, where that slight pressure increased. It never was powerful enough to bring me to my knees, and that was true until I reached the 1000th step. There, my whole being felt like it was about to be ripped out of its place as I huffed, desperately gasping for breath. I grinned. This is how it's supposed to be, so show me your worst. A powerful downpour of heavenly energy crashed against me. It was like standing under a waterfall. The pressure was pushing me to my knees and I would have buckled down in an instant if I didn't anticipate such. As I thought, every milestone would have the pressure double up, but the 1000th step, the pressure increased exponentially, and I felt like I was about to drown. I took a deep breath, and grit my old teeth until I felt them about to crack, then I took a powerful step forward. The stomp was mighty enough that I left a print on the staircase. This was new. And it had given me a slight understanding of something mystical, but I couldn't put my hands on it. This step that I took, though it was simple, it hid a secret that I was going to uncover once this goddamned pressure lessens a bit. But my prayers go unrewarded, as the pressure only increased the more I walked upwards. The step that crushed the staircase didn't happen again, and I didn't understand why, but no need to fret over things I can't figure out right now. I'll need to first make my way up. After a few more steps, I felt like my bones were about to break from the pressure, so I sat down in the lotus position, which was damn difficult, as even moving my body under this pressure felt like my limbs were made of lead. Once I entered my meditation state, I found myself looking at my body, and all of its poison meridians, they were suffering, threatening to break. This wasn't good for me. The spiritual energy that is assaulting my body was indeed intended to temper my soul, but that would be good only if my body was attuned to the spiritual chi. As for me, I'm made of poison chi. I tried to channel the poison chi in my dantian to reinforce my meridians, but it was difficult to course through my spirit veins and reach the meridians. The pressure was powerful enough that it blocked my veins. My body began shuddering against the pressure. I need to go back. I can't move anymore. This was the only idea that was passing through my mind. I can't keep going. I must give up. But for some reason, this reasoning felt wrong. I instinctively felt that there was an opportunity here, that I could take, something huge that can allow me to reach greater heights. But why am I being prodded to give up? The thought is so forceful that I'm almost certain it's not mine. Someone or something is actually trying to tamper with my thoughts, so I would give up. I looked within my shuddering meridians and then noticed something I failed to see the first time. The meridians weren't threatening to shatter, otherwise, under this pressure, they would have broken the first time. They are actually giddy. Anticipating something even, my whole body is actually shuddering at an incoming fortuitous encounter that I'm failing to even notice or see. Then it hit me like a truck, the energy. This is pure spiritual chi, not unlike world's chi, but more like this is a purified version of it, removed from heavenly law. This is not true spiritual qi, but a fake one, though even if fake, it was the best thing I could hope for. Natural heavenly qi is opposed to my body, and it will not work in tune with it, but this inferior version, this boundless qi that has no law inside it, would be perfect for my body if I were to add one single thing to it. Something that the spiritual qi didn't come with. Poison. I took a breath and forced my meridians to shudder and release all their pent-up force against the torrent of the incomplete qi assaulting me, and where the veins that linked the meridians were forced shut before, they now opened up, causing the poison qi in me to move through them with savage glee, even tearing some of the veins as they moved to cause me to spit a mouthful of blood from my mouth before I managed to gather my bearing. I need to be calm and can't have my body over-exit itself to its demise. I willed my energy to move about in a slower manner, but strong enough to force its way against the incomplete qi pressuring me. Then when they made a full circulation, I was ready. There and then I opened my mouth and shot a mouthful of my own poison qi against the fake qi. The two mixed together, and the qi that was incomplete found what was missing within my qi. Though it wasn't as divine as heavenly law, there was still law in my own qi, and it engulfed it and transformed with it, turning a great majority of this fake qi into true poison qi. And lo and behold, as the pressure on my body switched from that of a dam pouring against my body to me being a black hole as I consumed all the incoming energy with lustful glee. Breakthrough came immediately, and I felt my body shudder and shake. Foundation establishment, second realm, then the third, then the fourth, and it kept going until I reached foundation establishment lower peak, the seventh layer of the foundation establishment cultivation level. My body shuddered as it took in all of that energy and didn't find a way for it to release it. The pressure lessened intently, but I had so much energy within me that needed to be released. And what other way to release this energy but to use a spell? I found enlightenment in the poison god's own application of the poison tiger claw. One claw is all the poison god's book allowed me to learn, and I used the skill as the book instructed, one claw to rend the heavens, and I stood up then struck at the empty air in front of, where 5 cleaving marks of dense but thin rays of poison qi shot out in the air in front of me. They moved with speed enough to contend with qi suns bolting out from in front of the soul formation puppets. But I knew, this strength was only temporary. So I used the claw attack again, this time reining it in. This was the perfect place to train, as with every attack I did, the fake qi would merge with my poison qi and come towards me to fill me up with even more qi, which I used to my advantage in trying these attacks and spells. And so, I began shooting out claw attacks, poison escape, and even a new skill that the poison god's book unlocked for me when I reached the 7th layer of foundation establishment. Twisted snake. An attack that bends perception, giving the one opposing you the sense that your hands were snakes instead of arms, unable to understand where the attack would come from only to have them lying dead at your feet the moment you strike. An insidious attack that plays against one's own sight, for if one were to use their eyes to track the user's arms, they'll die before knowing how it happened. And best of all, my body no longer had the thin skin of old people, but a slightly unhealthy skin tone, and far fewer tumors and pustules than before. I could even feel my hair had fully grown back, though I believe it's still gray, it beats being half bald. And so I continued practicing in this unlimited qi space. An ascendant cultivator had so many means to create something like this, for many would find this place heaven. I believe for an ascendant cultivator this pagoda is nothing more than a discardable toy. For they can use Saint Qi, which is far superior to regular Qi. As for me, as long as I get to use this fake Qi to my advantage and practice my skills with no regard to Qi consumption, then I'm more than willing to spend a few months here until I perfect all of my skills. It's high time I start learning how to use the powers at my disposal, as relying always on X will only cause me to grow complacent. And so, my training montage started.